Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine, if you will, a world before the hum of electricity, before the instant glow of a screen, and before the relentless tick of a digital clock. We are stepping back, not into a history book filled with dates and signatures, but into the quiet, heavy air of 1776. It is a time of revolutionary fervour, yes, but for the average person, the revolution is secondary to the immediate crushing demands of survival. The sun has not yet crested the horizon, but you are already awake. It is not an alarm that stirs you. Alarms are for a future you haven't yet imagined. It is the cold. A creeping, persistent chill that radiates from the unfinished wooden walls of your cabin, seeping through the thin, uneven glass of the window pane. Your room smells of pine resin, damp earth, and the lingering acrid ghost of last night's hearth fire, a smell that will never truly leave the fabric of your clothes. Listen, the world outside is not silent, it is waiting. You hear the rhythmic scraping of a neighbour's shovel, the sharp, impatient cry of a rooster that sounds more like an order than a greeting. In 1776, the day does not wait for you to catch up. It demands your immediate physical presence. To stay in bed is a luxury you cannot afford, for to remain still is to fall behind, and to fall behind is to risk everything. You sit up, your feet meeting the cold, rough-hewn floorboards. This is the reality of the birth of a nation that most textbooks overlook. It wasn't just built on grand declarations and ink on parchment. It was built on the cracked, calloused hands of thousands who woke to this exact same freezing darkness, day after day. You are not a spectator here, you are a participant. Your muscles ache from the labour of yesterday, and the weight of today is already settling onto your shoulders before your eyes are even fully open. Think of this life not as a primitive past, but as a masterpiece of endurance. Every action you take, stoking the embers, fetching water, mending a tear in your woolen breeches, is a calculated move in a complex game of survival. There is a strange, quiet dignity in this, a resilience that we have largely traded away for convenience. As we journey through these hours together, let the modern world fade into the background. You are here, in the dim light of a flickering lamp, preparing for a life that asks everything of you, yet offers nothing but the satisfaction of another day survived. The channel Sleepy History with Kevin is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. As you stand, the floorboards groan under your weight, a sound you have grown to recognize as intimately as your own heartbeat. Your home is not a place you retreat to for leisure. It is a machine for living, a workspace that demands constant maintenance. There is no separation here between the domestic and the industrial. The hearth, the centre of your existence, is currently a dark, cooling pit. In 1776, fire is not a simple convenience. It is a precious, volatile resource that must be earned. Every stick of wood burned was once a tree you or your neighbours had to fell, trim, split and stack. You feel the physical weight of that labour in your arms even now. You begin the morning ritual, kneeling before the fireplace. The ashes are cold, but deep beneath the grey surface, a tiny glowing ember may still be breathing. You coax it with paper or dried shavings, your breath steady and focused. This is the first test of the day, patience. If you fail to revive the fire, the day starts in shadow, and the water for your morning meal will not boil. The room is tight, cluttered by necessity. You share this space with your family and perhaps an apprentice or two. Privacy is a concept that has not yet been invented in the way we understand it today. In the dim, flickering light, you see the outlines of others stirring, the soft rustle of homespun wool, the quiet sigh of someone waking from a restless dream. You navigate the room with a practiced grace, knowing exactly where the heavy iron pot sits, where the water bucket is stationed, and which floorboards to avoid to keep from waking the youngest children. Outside, the first grey light of dawn filters through the shutters. You move to the window and push them open. The air that rushes in is crisp, smelling of damp morning dew and the faint earthy sweetness of the nearby fields. You look out at the landscape, not a vista to be admired from a distance, but a terrain to be conquered. You see the paths worn into the dirt by hundreds of footsteps, the small garden plot that provides your sustenance, and the distant tree line that promises both shelter and a daunting amount of work. Your clothing, stiff and heavy, acts as your primary armor against this world. You pulled on your linen shirt and wool breeches last night, and they remain your uniform for the day. There is a texture to this life, a coarseness that reminds you of your role in the cycle of nature. You are not above the elements, you are woven into them. As you watch the world outside fully wake, you feel the quiet urgency of the morning. There are animals to be fed, the garden to be tended, and 100 small repetitive tasks that, when added together, form the very structure of your existence. Each movement is deliberate, each sound a reminder that you are part of a living, breathing community that relies on the rhythm of the rising sun. Hunger is a constant companion in 1776, a quiet, insistent hum at the back of your mind. As the fire finally catches, leaping into a confident orange, the atmosphere in the room shifts. The harsh, cold reality of the night is replaced by the primal necessity of the morning meal. Today, like most days, breakfast is not a grand affair of variety, it is an exercise in resourcefulness. You reach for the coarse, stone-ground grain, the bounty of last autumn's harvest, carefully portioned to last until the first greens of spring. There is no packaging, no refined labels, just the raw, honest texture of life. As you stir the grain into boiling water, the steam begins to carry the scent of earth and nourishment through the small cabin. This simple process is a ceremony of survival. You are consuming the energy of the soil, transformed through your own labor into the strength required for the long day ahead. Milk, if the cow has been kind, is added to the porridge. It is cool and rich, a stark contrast to the heat of the hearth. You watch as your family begins to gather around the table. A sturdy piece of wood, scarred by years of use, stained by generations of meals and spills. There is little conversation. Speech is a luxury to be saved for later, when the urgency of the morning has subsided. For now there is only the rhythmic clinking of wooden spoons against bowls. Every bite carries a history. The grain you are eating was grown in fields that required back-breaking labor to clear of stones and stumps. The water you used was drawn from a well that took weeks of digging. In 1776, you are intimately connected to the source of your food in a way that modern society has largely forgotten. You know the exact struggles that went into every spoonful. If a crop failed, or if the winter was harsher than expected, the impact is felt directly in these bowls. You observe the hands of those around you. Your children, your partner, they are already stained with the soil of the property, their skin roughened by the relentless tasks of the home. This meal is not just about satiation, it is about fortification. It is the fuel that allows you to face the physical challenges of the clearing, the garden, and the woods as you eat. You feel a deep, quiet gratitude, not for abundance, but for the reliability of the cycle. Outside, the sun has fully cleared the tree line, casting long, sharp shadows across the dirt yard. The day has officially begun, and with it the weight of responsibility feels a little heavier. You finish the last of your porridge, the heat lingering in your chest, a small but essential shield against the world outside. The bowl is wiped clean, nothing is wasted, not even the smallest grain. You stand up, your body feeling slightly more capable, slightly more ready for the demands that await you under the vast, uncaring sky of 1776. Stepping out of the cabin, the transition is jarring. The small, protected world of your home gives way to the vast, open expanse of the colonial frontier. The air here is different. It carries the scent of pine, livestock, and the raw, unrefined energy of a land still being tamed. In 1776, your survival is not merely an individual endeavour, it is a collective one. You look toward the neighbour's homestead, just a silhouette against the rising sun, and you know that their morning too has been defined by the same struggle for heat, water and food. You begin your work today. The priority is the clearing. The land is unforgiving, filled with stubborn roots and ancient stones that seem to rise from the earth with every cycle of the seasons. Your tools are few, a heavy iron axe, a spade, and the strength of your own back. There is no machinery to ease the burden, no shortcut to clear the field. Every strike of the axe is a conversation with the forest, a negotiation for space. Your breathing synchronizes with the swing of the tool, a steady, rhythmic cadence that defines your morning. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow with a sleeve that is stiff with dried mud. You see another neighbour walking along the dirt path that connects the sparse collection of cabins. You exchange a nod, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of mutual endurance. In this society, to see your neighbour is to know you are not alone in the immense, often intimidating wild. You trade information as easily as you trade labour, a report of a broken fence, a rumour of a late frost, or the sighting of a wolf near the edge of the property. Work here is dictated by the sun and the weather, not the clock. If the clouds gather, the urgency increases. If the heat rises, the pace slows. You learn to read the sky with the precision of a scholar, deciphering the subtle shifts in wind and colour that signal a change in fortune. The earth beneath your boots is hard, compact and indifferent. It does not yield because you are tired. It only yields to sustained, repetitive pressure. As the sun climbs higher, the reality of the American Revolution seems both a world away and intensely close. You hear the distant, muffled sound of a drum in the village, a reminder that the world is changing, that borders are being redrawn, and that the quiet life you lead is increasingly fragile. Yet you return to the work. There is a strange comfort in the repetition. In a world full of political uncertainty and the shifting tides of war, the soil remains the only constant. It is the one thing you can touch, the one thing you can influence, and the one thing that will, if you labour enough, provide the foundation for another day. All stories on this channel, Sleepy History with Kevin, are fictional, thoughtfully crafted around historical themes and inspired by real events, figures, and periods, reimagined for engaging storytelling. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is purely coincidental. The sun hangs high now, a golden anchor in the vast pale blue of the sky. The intensity of the morning's labour begins to subside, replaced by a heavy, sun-drenched stillness that settles over the countryside. You drop your tool, a heavy wooden-handled hoe, and stand for a moment, letting your lungs expand. The silence of midday in 1776 is not empty. It is filled with the drone of insects, the rustle of dry grass, and the distant rhythmic call of a hawk circling above. You find a patch of shade beneath the sprawling limbs of an old oak tree. This is your sanctuary. There is no reclining chair, no cool breeze from a machine. There is only the earth, hard and welcoming. As you sit, you lean back against the rough bark. Your hands, stained with soil and calloused from the wood, rest on your knees in this brief moment of respite. The vastness of the world feels both intimidating and strangely liberating. You think of the rumours that drift into the village, talk of continental armies, of changing loyalties, of a war for something called independence. These are distant, abstract ideas that seem to belong to a different world. Here, the immediate reality is the heat, the thirst, and the encroaching need to finish the weeding before the shadows stretch too long. You are a small, quiet cog in a machine that is much larger than you realise, an anonymous participant in the birth of something that will echo through the centuries. It is during these quiet moments that you realise how easily a life can be forgotten. There are no written records of your struggle today, no grand monuments to the sweat you've shed or the fear you've quelled. There is only the land, which remembers nothing, and the cycle which demands everything. Yet in this anonymity there is a profound peace. You are not fighting for a name, you are fighting for the continuity of life itself, for the hearth fire, for the next harvest, for the people who will sleep safely tonight because of the work you did today. Before we drift further into the memories of this era, if you have found a moment of calm or curiosity in these stories, I invite you to support the channel. A simple like on this video or a subscription to Sleepy History with Kevin helps ensure that these tales of the quiet, everyday human experience continue to be told. If you feel called to, share in the comments what piece of history fascinates you most. Your engagement breathes life into these forgotten moments and keeps the history of our shared past alive. As the sun begins its slow, steady descent toward the afternoon, we prepare to face the final tasks of the day, grounded by the simple, enduring truth that we are all part of a long, unfolding story. The sun, once a harsh master, begins its gentle descent. The long shadows stretch across the fields like thin, dark fingers, reaching out to reclaim the land from the day's intensity. In 1776, you measure time not by the ticking of a clock, but by the angle of the light and the slow, aching decline of your own energy. The tasks that seemed manageable in the crisp morning air now feel like heavy mountains to climb. Your back protests with every movement, and your breath comes a little shorter, a little more ragged. There is a shift in the air as evening approaches, a cooling breeze that carries the scent of damp soil and approaching night. You gather your tools, their weight suddenly more apparent, and begin the trek back toward the cabin. The path seems longer now, the incline of the hill more stubborn. Every step is a negotiation with gravity. You pass the neighbor's home again. The activity there has also slowed. Smoke begins to curl from their chimney, a sign that the day's primary work is done, replaced by the evening's final duties. Entering your home is like stepping into a different dimension. The interior is dim, holding the coolness of the day. Even as the outdoor air begins to bite with the coming chill, you set your tools aside, a ritualistic act, acknowledging that the fight for survival will pause for a few hours. The fire, which you tended so carefully before dawn, now needs to be revived. You spend these minutes in a state of semi-consciousness, moving on instinct. You know the wood, you know the sparks, and you know the exact rhythm required to coax the flame back to life. As the hearth light grows, it illuminates the faces of your family. There is a weariness in their eyes, a shared exhaustion that needs no words. You feel a profound sense of connection to them, a bond forged not just by blood, but by the collective endurance of the day. You are all survivors of the sun, the wind, and the relentless demands of the frontier. You begin to prepare the evening meal, a simple, hearty stew of roots, perhaps a bit of salt-cured meat if the supplies allow. It is a slow, methodical process. You watch the pot, the bubbles rising in a lazy, rhythmic dance. The smell of the food, savory and warm, fills the small space, pushing back the encroaching shadows. In these moments you contemplate the future. The whispers of war and the talk of independence feel like distant rumblings of a coming storm. You cannot stop the storm, just as you cannot stop the sun from setting. All you can do is secure the house, feed the fire, and hold close those you love. The day was hard, but the night offers the promise of rest. A brief, fragile reprieve before the cycle begins again at the first light of dawn. Night has claimed the world outside. The landscape, which was yours to conquer and shape just a few hours ago, has retreated into an absolute velvety darkness. Only the stars, sharp and uncaring, pinprick the sky above, while your cabin remains the sole beacon of warmth in a vast, silent wilderness. The transition from the frantic rhythm of the day to the heavy, settled stillness of the evening is profound. The fire is now the heart of the home, its rhythmic crackling and popping the only music in a room filled with shadows. You sit close to the hearth, the heat pressing against your face, drying the lingering sweat of the day. Around you the family settles. This is the time when the guard is lowered. The physical labour of the field is done, but the mental labour of keeping a family whole in a time of uncertainty continues. You watch the flickering light dance across the faces of your children. They are quiet, exhausted, yet there is a resilience in their stillness that humbles you. They do not talk of politics or the revolution. They talk of the simple things: a bird seen in the woods, a stone found by the creek, the promise of a better harvest. In the dim light, you repair a garment, the needle moving with a muscle memory that doesn't require your conscious thought. The thread is strong, a metaphor for the thin, invisible ties that bind you to this land and to each other. You think of the neighbours, and then further out, to the villages and towns you rarely visit. Are they also sitting by their fires, watching the embers glow, wondering what the morning will bring? The sense of being part of a larger, invisible tapestry is strong. You are individual, yes, but you are also part of a movement, a wave of people trying to carve out a life in a land that feels both newborn and ancient. Sometimes a story is shared. It might be a memory of a grandfather, a tale of a long-lost home across the sea, or a fable designed to teach the wisdom of patience. These stories are the currency of the evening. They don't just pass the time, they anchor you. They remind you that you come from somewhere, that your struggles are not unique, and that the endurance you feel today is an inheritance passed down through generations of survivors. There is an underlying tension, of course. The revolution is a shadow that stretches across every household in the colonies. You hear it in the way the wind rattles the shutters, making you look toward the door with a sudden sharp instinct of protection. You know that the peace of this night is conditional, but you refuse to let that fear consume the evening. You lean back, letting the warmth soak into your bones. You have done what was required today. You have survived, you have fed your own, and you have remained steadfast. For tonight, that is enough. The fire burns low, the embers pulsate like a dying star, and the darkness outside is kept at bay by nothing more than your will and a pile of dry pine. You are small, you are tired, but you are here, and in the grand, unfolding history of this moment, that is your victory. The fire has burned down to a deep pulsating bed of red and orange. The house is quiet now, the energy of the day finally draining away from your limbs. You stand and move about the room with a hushed reverence, performing the final rituals of the day. You dampen the fire, not extinguishing it completely, but banking the ashes so that a spark might endure until the morning. It is a gesture of hope, a quiet promise that tomorrow will come, and that you will be ready to meet it. You check the latch on the door. It is a simple piece of iron, cold and solid under your palm. In 1776, this lock is not a defense against an army. It is a boundary between the wild, unpredictable world and the sanctuary you have cultivated. You listen for a moment to the wind brushing against the exterior walls, a sound that once seemed menacing but now feels like a lullaby. The darkness is total, heavy and thick, pressing against the small, uneven glass of the window. Your bed is a simple structure, the mattress filled with straw that crinkles softly under your weight, a sound that has become the soundtrack to your deepest dreams. You lie back, feeling the tension bleed out of your muscles. The blankets are heavy, smelling of wood smoke and the faint, sweet scent of dried herbs stored in the rafters. There is no luxury here, but there is a profound, grounding comfort. In the silence of the night, you feel the house itself settling, the wood shifting and groaning as the temperature drops. This is the time when the mind often wanders, untethered from the demands of the soil and the sun. You think of the year 1776, a number that seems to loom large in the minds of those who speak of politics, but to you it is simply the year of the harvest, the year of the long winter, the year you lived. You wonder about the nature of time, how it stretches during the long, hot afternoons of labour and compresses into the blink of an eye during the night. You are learning that history is not just composed of grand speeches, but of these quiet, hidden hours where survival is the only objective. If this journey into the quiet rhythms of the past has offered you a moment of peace in your own busy life, please consider how you can help us continue this exploration. Subscribing to Sleepy History with Kevin and turning on notifications ensures that you won't miss the next chapter of our story as we unfold the secrets of the past. Your support is the thread that keeps this channel growing. If you felt a resonance with the life of these colonial ancestors, leave a comment below. Tell us what aspect of this historical life you find most intriguing. Whether you're falling asleep to this story or simply reflecting on the simplicity of the past, your presence here is a vital part of our community. As you drift closer to sleep, let the concerns of your own era fade, replaced by the calm, steady heartbeat of a time long gone. Sleep in 1776 does not come as a single, uninterrupted descent into darkness. It is an ocean, layered and deep, with currents that pull you from the shore of consciousness into the vast, silent mid-waters of the night. As your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the household, you become acutely aware of the world that exists beyond the frame of your bed. The night is not empty. It is a tapestry of subtle, breathing sounds that, to a modern ear, might seem unsettling, but to you are merely the pulse of the living world. A soft rhythmic scraping against the roof, a branch dancing in the wind, becomes a metronome for your drifting thoughts. You hear the occasional muffled shifting of the livestock in the barn, a low, comforting grumble that tells you all is well in the small world you have built. The house itself breathes, the wood expanding and contracting as the evening air cools, sending small, sharp cracks through the silence. You have learned to interpret these noises. They are the language of your home, reassuring you of its structural integrity. You find yourself in that liminal state, the space between wakefulness and dreaming. It is a time for reflection that the daylight never allows. With the physical labour of the day set aside, your mind is free to revisit the faces you saw, the words you exchanged, and the tasks that remain for tomorrow. There is a peculiar clarity in this darkness. You realize that the anxiety you feel about the changing world, about the revolution, and about the future of this new nation is shared by thousands of others who are also currently lying awake in the quiet corners of the colonies. In these deep hours, you are not an isolated soul. You are part of a vast, unspoken network of individuals who are all, in their own way, holding the line. The blankets feel heavier now, a warm, protective weight that seals you against the encroaching chill of the forest night. You allow yourself to sink further. The imagery of the day, the golden fields, the rough bark of the trees, the grey smoke of the hearth begins to soften, blurring at the edges, transforming into the surreal, gentle landscape of a dream. Historians suggest that this way of resting, segmented and deeply connected to the environment, was common for our ancestors. They lived in harmony with the cycles of light and dark, their bodies and minds finely tuned to the subtle cues of the seasons. As you drift, you feel the boundaries of your own life expanding. You are no longer just an individual with a to-do list. You are a link in a long, unbroken chain of human experience. You are resting not just for yourself, but as part of a collective endurance, preparing your mind and spirit for the inevitable return of the sun. The night holds you, protecting you, teaching you that even in the deepest darkness, there is a rhythm to be followed and a peace to be found. In the deepest watch of the night, the world of 1776 feels less like a struggle and more like a gentle, rhythmic flow. You are suspended in that delicate bridge between the exhaustion of the physical body and the wanderings of an untethered mind. Your dreams tonight are not chaotic. They are woven from the threads of your daily life. You dream of the steady, warm touch of sunlight on the fields, the satisfying weight of an axe in your hand, and the simple grounding sound of a community coming together. These are the visions of a life rooted in the earth, a life that demands resilience, but rewards it with a quiet, unmatched stability. There is a profound beauty in this existence, despite its hardships. You see this beauty in your dreams, the way the grain looks just before harvest, the way the embers glow in the deep hearth, the way a shared meal can bridge the gap between people. You realize that you are building something that extends far beyond your own lifetime. Every patch you mend, every acre you clear, and every evening you spend keeping your family close is a testament to your endurance. You're not just surviving, you are anchoring a vision of a future that you may never fully see, but that you are actively creating with every breath. The silence of the house acts as a cocoon, shielding you from the political storms and the uncertainties that threaten the colonies. In this sanctuary you are powerful, not through status or wealth, but through the sheer stubborn act of existing and persisting. The night reminds you that time is a long winding river, and you are currently navigating one of its most turbulent bends. Yet you are not alone. You feel the steady pulse of the land itself beneath you, a silent partner in your struggle, ancient and enduring. Before we drift further into the stillness, I want to invite you once more to engage with this community. If these stories have provided you with a sense of calm, or if they've sparked a deeper interest in the lives of those who came before us, please make sure to subscribe to Sleepy History with Kevin. Each subscription and every comment you leave acts as a beacon, guiding more souls to this quiet corner of the internet where history meets reflection. Your feedback is what allows this channel to evolve if there is a specific era or a particular aspect of daily life you wish to explore in our future journeys. Leave a note in the comments. We read every word, and your voice helps shape the stories we tell. As you continue to settle into the night, remember that your interest in the past is what keeps it alive, breathing meaning into the silent, dusty pages of history. The night has thinned, becoming translucent. The absolute darkness of midnight has surrendered to a soft, charcoal grey hue that whispers of the approaching dawn. This is the hour of the deepest, most restorative rest, the time when the world stands still, caught in the pause between what was and what will be. Your body is heavy, surrendered entirely to the weight of the blankets, and your mind is finally empty of the day's worries. The labour of the field, the tension of the politics, and the urgency of the harvest, all have dissolved into the quiet, cool air of the room. You are drifting in a space of pure existence. There is no past to regret, no future to fear. There is only the slow, steady beat of your own heart and the faint, comforting warmth that lingers near the banked fire. In this stillness you feel a profound sense of continuity. You are the inheritor of a long tradition of endurance. Every generation before you has faced these same hours, has woken to these same dawns, and has found the strength to rise once more. You feel a kinship with them, an invisible hand stretched across the centuries, grounding you in the realization that life, despite its challenges, is inherently precious. The sounds of the night, the nocturnal rustle of the forest, the distant call of an owl have faded. The world is waiting for the first touch of the sun. You too are waiting, not with anxiety, but with a deep, quiet readiness. The cycle is complete, and yet it is about to begin anew. This is the rhythm of 1776, a rhythm that you have internalized, a rhythm that now guides your breathing, your rest and your soul. As you sink into these final moments of deep sleep, let go of everything. Let the history of this time wash over you like a gentle, healing tide. You are safe. You are part of something much larger than yourself, a story that continues to unfold in the quiet corners of our shared human memory. Soon, the rooster will call, the fire will be stirred, and the world will demand your strength again. But for now, there is only the peace of the night. Rest now, and let the dawn wait for you. This content is inspired by and adapted from public domain works available through Project Gutenberg. The material has been transformed through original narration, editing, and storytelling to create a unique experience for educational and entertainment purposes. Even in the most remote corners of the colonies, the air feels different lately. It is not a change in the weather, but a shift in the collective spirit. When you travel to the village square to trade your surplus grain or mend a tool at the blacksmith's, you sense it in the way people speak, or, more accurately, in the way they pause before speaking. There is a new weight to the words exchanged over the anvil and the market stall. The topic is no longer just the quality of the harvest or the health of the livestock. It is the nature of the authority that governs these lives. You remember a time when the decisions made across the ocean felt like laws of nature, as distant and immutable as the winter cold. But now those decisions are being questioned. You hear men debating the price of goods and the fairness of regulations in voices that are quieter, more guarded, yet undeniably firm. It is not a loud, defiant roar, but a slow tectonic shifting of the earth beneath your feet. You find yourself listening more intently, catching fragments of conversations about liberty, representation, and the inherent right to one's own labour. There is a strange shared caution in the village. You look into the eyes of your neighbours and see a reflection of your own uncertainty. They too are worried about how these political ripples will affect the rhythm of their daily work. Will the spring planting be interrupted? Will the markets remain open? The fear is not of a specific enemy, but of the disruption to the sacred cycle of survival. You are all farmers, labourers and mothers trying to protect the hearth, and any force that threatens the stability of that life is viewed with deep inherent suspicion. Yet there is also an emerging sense of pride. You see it in the way a man stands a little straighter when he speaks of the colony's future, or the way a woman manages her household with a fierce, quiet defiance. You are becoming aware that your life, the very life of labour and endurance you have been leading, is the foundation of something much larger. It is not just about clearing land anymore, it is about the shape of the society you are building. You realise that the freedom to work your own land, to keep the fruits of your labour, and to guide your children's future is worth more than anything you have ever possessed. As you head back to your cabin, the path seems familiar, yet somehow transformed. You look at the fences you built and the fields you ploughed, and for the first time you see them not just as chores, but as investments in a future that belongs to you. The politics of the day are still a distant, stormy sky, but you are finally acknowledging that you are no longer just a spectator, you are a participant in the birth of an idea. You quicken your pace, eager to return to the sanctuary of your home, where the fire is waiting and the truth of your labour remains the only authority you truly recognise. In the quiet of the late afternoon, when the work is done and the shadows grow long, you find yourself leaning on the wisdom of those who came before. In 1776, knowledge is not found in books for most, but in the observation of the world around you. You know that the moss on the north side of the tree is a compass, that the behaviour of the ants before a storm is a weather report, and that the first bloom of the wildflowers is a calendar of survival. This is a quiet, unspoken language passed down through generations, a map of how to live when you are left to your own devices. There is a certain comfort in this deep ancestral knowledge. When the political news becomes too loud, or the future feels too daunting, you turn to the earth. You know that the seasons will turn regardless of who sits in a parliament across the sea. The oaks will drop their acorns, the river will freeze and thaw, and the spring will unfailingly return. There is a profound stoic peace in knowing that the fundamental rhythms of life are beyond the control of any king or government. You recall the stories your mother told you, tales of resilience, of ancestors who crossed the vast, unforgiving ocean with nothing but a few tools and an unbreakable will. These are your legends. They do not involve epic battles or kings on thrones. They involve the courage to build a cabin in a forest, the stamina to clear a field, and the faith to plant seeds in soil that has never been tilled. These stories are the bedrock of your identity. They serve as a reminder that the struggles of today are only the latest chapter in a long, ongoing history of human endurance. Sometimes, in the quiet, you perform small personal rituals that feel like prayers. Perhaps it is a specific way you stake your tomato vines, a certain melody you hum while you churn the butter, or a tradition of leaving a portion of the harvest for the wild creatures. These acts are not superstitious in the way the modern world might label them. They are acts of alignment. They are your way of saying, I am here, I am part of this world, and I respect the balance. As you walk through the woods near your home, the air is thick with the scent of pine and damp, decaying leaves, a rich earthy smell that speaks of life and death in a constant, beautiful cycle. You feel a sudden sharp clarity. The world is changing, yes, and the revolution is a tempest that will touch everyone, but you are anchored in something older, something more resilient than any ideology. You are part of the very fabric of the landscape. And as long as you can read the signs of the forest and keep the rhythm of the seasons, you have the tools to survive whatever the coming years might bring. You carry this quiet, steady hope back with you, feeling lighter, as if the forest itself has shared a fragment of its own eternal patience. The air has acquired a new biting quality, a sharp edge that tells you the season is turning. In 1776, you do not need a calendar to know that winter is whispering at your door. You see it in the way the animals grow restless, the way the forest sheds its leaves to stand as grey, shivering skeletons against the sky. This is the time of the great gathering, the final frantic push to ensure that the pantry is stocked, the woodpile is high, and the home is sealed against the bitter, freezing breath of the months ahead. Every task now carries the weight of a countdown. You spend your days in the fields and the woods, working with a speed and intensity you haven't felt since spring. The harvest must be stored, the roots must be buried in the cool, dark earth of the cellar, the meat must be smoked and salted. This is the season where the margin for error disappears. You are not just working for the present, you are working for your very survival in the depths of January. It is a grueling, relentless process that tests your endurance to its absolute limit. Yet there is a deep satisfaction in it, the primal pleasure of being prepared. You watch the horizon for the first signs of snow. When it comes, it will transform the world into a silent, white wilderness, cutting you off from the village and confining you to the small, protected world of your cabin. You think of the winter months not as a prison, but as a time of forced reflection. It is during these long, dark nights that you will mend every garment, sharpen every tool, and share stories by the fire until the hearth burns low. You are building a fortress of warmth and sustenance, a place where your family can endure until the cycle finally turns back toward the light. There is a stoic grace in this preparation. You do not complain about the cold or the weight of the tasks, you simply move. Your muscles ache, your hands are raw, and your energy is spent, but your mind remains focused on the hearth. You are a guardian of the flame, a protector of the cycle. Every log you stack is a promise kept to the people who rely on you. As you stand in the yard at the end of a long, cold day, watching the sun dip behind the tree line, you feel a profound sense of peace. The work is hard, but it is honest, and it is necessary. The world may be on the brink of revolution, and the future may be uncertain, but for now the path is clear. You have prepared for the winter, you have secured your home, and you have remained steadfast. You look toward the small, glowing window of your cabin, and for a moment you feel an immense gratitude for the simple, hard-won life you lead. You are ready for the snow, you are ready for the silence, you are ready for the winter. In the harshest times, when the supplies run low or the winter settles in with a cruel, unrelenting chill, the true character of this community is revealed. You have learned that survival in 1776 is not a solitary conquest. It is a fragile, interconnected web of small, unseen acts of kindness. When a neighbour falls ill or a roof is damaged by a heavy storm, the village does not wait for an order or a payment. People simply show up. You see them walking through the mud, tools in hand, their faces set with a quiet, unwavering resolve to help. You have been on both sides of this exchange. You have stood in your neighbour's barn helping to secure a wall, and you have had them stand in yours, offering a bit of grain when your own stores were dwindling. There is no ledger kept here. There is no tally of who owes whom. It is a system built on the simple, ancient understanding that we are all, in this vast and often unforgiving wilderness, responsible for one another. This is the bedrock of your society, not the laws written in distant capitals, but the unspoken promises made between neighbours over a fence line. These bonds are forged in the quietest ways. It is a bundle of dry firewood left on a porch during a blizzard, a basket of fresh greens shared in the early spring, or a helping hand with the heavy labour of the harvest. These acts are the currency of your world. They hold more value than any coin, for they are the threads that keep the community from unravelling. When you look at your neighbours now, you do not just see fellow labourers, you see the people who, like you, have chosen to endure, to grow, and to protect the life you have built. As the evening settles in, you often find yourself thinking of the people in the other cabins, the flickers of light in the distance that mirror your own. You feel a sense of profound security in that sight. You know that if the worst were to happen, if the storm were to break, or if the world outside were to finally reach your doorstep with its conflict and change, you would not be standing alone, you would be standing with them. This realization changes how you view your own struggle, the weariness in your limbs, the roughness of your hands, and the constant rhythmic demand of the daily tasks no longer feel like a burden to be carried in isolation. They are shared experiences. You are part of a collective heart beating in time with the seasons and the land, and as you prepare for another night, you carry the warmth of this community with you. You know that as long as you have the land, the hearth, and each other, you have everything you need to survive. The night is deep, and the world is uncertain, but the bond you share with those around you is a light that will never truly go out. As the months turn, and you find yourself repeating the cycle of labour and rest, a strange thought often crosses your mind. Who will remember this? You look at the walls you have built, the fields you have cleared, and the hearth you have tended, and you realize that your life is essentially anonymous. History, as it is whispered in the village square, or read in the occasional printed broadside, is focused on generals, statesmen, and those who shape the policies of nations. Yet you feel a deep, quiet certainty that this, the work you do, the way you raise your children, the endurance you display, is the true foundation of whatever comes next. You are an architect of history, though you have no blueprint and no title. Every decision you make to persevere, every moment you choose to be kind to a neighbour, and every day you spend teaching your children the value of honest labour is a brick being laid in the foundation of a future you will never inhabit. It is a humble, silent work. It does not require applause, and it will never be etched into stone monuments. But it is essential. Without the resilience of people like you, the ones who keep the hearths burning and the fields tilled, there would be no nation for the leaders to govern and no foundation upon which the ideals of liberty could ever be tested. You look at your hands, calloused and mapped with the fine lines of hard work, and you see not just age, but character. These hands have held the plough, rocked the cradle, mended the clothes, and stoked the fire. They have touched the very essence of life. There is a dignity in this that transcends the political turmoil of 1776. Whether independence is declared or the world remains as it is, your core existence, the need for food, for warmth, for community, and for the preservation of those you love, will remain the ultimate reality. Sometimes you wonder what the people of the future will think of you. Will they imagine you struggling in the cold? Will they understand the weight of the silence that surrounds you? You hope they see not just the hardship, but the profound sense of purpose that kept you moving through the darkest hours of winter. You are the heartbeat of the land, the steady, rhythmic pulse that ensures life persists, even when the world is in chaos. As you sit by the fire tonight, watching the embers pulse with a life of their own, you feel a connection to the future that is both abstract and deeply physical. You are sending your values, your strength, and your resilience forward in time through the lives of your children. The revolution may be a storm that reshapes the world, but your life is the bedrock, and as long as the bedrock holds, the world can weather any storm. You close your eyes content in the knowledge that you have lived, you have laboured, and you have mattered in the most quiet and enduring way possible. There is a morning, subtle and unassuming, where the air feels different. The biting, razor-sharp edge of the winter chill has softened, replaced by a gentle, damp breeze that smells faintly of thawed earth and waking life. You step out onto the porch, and for the first time in months, the silence of the morning is broken not by the howling of the wind, but by the tentative, melodic chirp of a bird. It is a tiny, fragile sound, but to you it rings out with the power of a trumpet. The long, dark season of endurance is yielding. You look across the fields, still brown and matted with the remnants of snow, and you see the first tiny spears of green pushing through the soil. They are small, almost invisible, yet they represent a triumph that is difficult to put into words. You have survived. You have kept the flame. You have maintained the boundary between the wild and the hearth, and you have seen the world through its most dormant, inhospitable state. This realization fills you with a quiet, powerful surge of energy that makes your exhaustion from the winter months seem like a small price to pay. The cabin, which was your sanctuary and your confinement, feels lighter today. You open the shutters wide, letting the pale, watery spring sun flood the room. The dust motes dance in the light, and the lingering scent of smoke is gradually pushed out by the fresh, cool breath of the season. You start the day's work, not with the desperate intensity of autumn, but with the steady, hopeful rhythm of renewal. There is so much to do. The fields must be prepared, the garden plots cleared, and the winter's weariness swept from the corners of the house. This transition from winter to spring is not just a change in temperature, it is a profound internal shift. The anxiety that often shadowed your thoughts during the dark nights of January begins to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. You feel a deep physical connection to the landscape as it awakens. You are reminded that life is cyclical, that decay is only ever a precursor to growth, and that no matter how long or cold the winter, the return of life is an immutable law of the world. As you work in the garden, your hands touching the soft, wet earth, you think of the generations that stood on this exact spot, feeling this exact same flicker of hope. You're part of an endless, recurring story of resilience. The world may still be filled with uncertainty. The news of the wider world still carries the rumble of distant change, but for this moment you are anchored in the simple, beautiful certainty of growth. You stand up, wiping the soil from your knees, and look toward the horizon. The winter has passed, the sun is rising, and you're ready for the cycle to begin anew. As the earth thaws and the fields turn green, the news travels with the spring breeze. It arrives in the form of weary travellers, riders on horseback, and the occasional printed broadside that finds its way to the local tavern. The talk is no longer speculative, it is urgent. In the village, the gathering of men around the blacksmith's forge has shifted from casual conversation to focused, tense discourse. You are a farmer, and your priorities are the plough and the seed. Yet you find that the world will not let you remain indifferent. The concept of independence has ceased to be a word used by distant politicians. It is now a question being asked in every kitchen, every clearing, and every heart in the colonies. You listen to the debates, not as a radical, but as someone who understands the value of land and the sweat required to improve it. You realize that the freedom you have fought for on this small plot, the right to the harvest you reap, is the very same principle being argued on a national scale. The personal struggle for survival and the national struggle for autonomy are beginning to mirror one another, merging into a singular pulse. There is a strange, heightened electricity in the air. The long silent winter has ended, and as nature regenerates, so does the political landscape. You see the change in your neighbours. Some are fearful, clutching their status quo, while others are ignited by a sudden fierce sense of possibility. You find yourself standing in the middle, looking at your own fields, and then toward the horizon. You are aware that the peace of your homestead might be fragile, that the coming months could bring disruption you are not prepared for. Yet there is a thrill in the air, a sense that the world is being reborn alongside the forest. In the quiet evenings you speak to your partner about these things. You don't speak of war or glory. You speak of what this might mean for the children. Will they grow up with a different relationship to the land? Will the fruits of their labour be their own, unencumbered by the heavy hand of a far-off king? These are the real questions. They are not grand abstract ideals. They are questions of bread, of home, and of legacy. You realize that you are standing on a threshold, witnessing a transformation that will define the lives of those who come after you. The spring work continues, but the rhythm is different now. It is more deliberate, more focused. Every seed you plant feels like a statement. Every fence you mend a consolidation of your right to be here. You are anchored in the soil, but your eyes are fixed on the future. The simple, hard-won life you lead has prepared you for this moment. You are not a soldier in a uniform, but you are a guardian of the values that will build a nation. You look out over the burgeoning fields, and you feel a quiet, unwavering readiness to face whatever the tide of history brings. The seasons change, the world turns, and you, at the center of it all, stand firm. It is easy to focus on the monumental, the wars, the declarations, the shifting borders of empires, but as you walk through your garden in the soft golden light of late spring, you find that the true poetry of life exists in the mundane. It is in the way the dew clings to the edge of a newly sprouted leaf, a delicate crystal of morning light. It is in the texture of a piece of hand-spun wool, warm and slightly coarse against your skin. It is in the simple rhythmic task of sharpening a tool, the sound of metal against stone, a song of preparation and purpose. In 1776, the pace of life forces you to notice these things. You do not rush past the beauty of a sunset or the intricate swirling grain of a piece of cedar. You are attuned to them because they are your reality. There is a deep, quiet joy in these small encounters. You realize that happiness is not a distant destination, but a state of presence, a way of engaging with the world that acknowledges the inherent value in every moment, no matter how small. When you sit on the threshold of your cabin and watch the children playing with a simple, carved wooden toy, you see the richness of their world. They are not concerned with the complexities of statehood or the rumbles of revolution. They are fully alive in the play, their laughter echoing against the backdrop of the forest. In that sound you hear the future, a sound that is hopeful, resilient, and utterly unburdened by the fears of the adults. You breathe in the scent of pine and moist earth, letting it ground you. You have learned that the struggle to survive does not preclude the capacity to appreciate beauty. In fact, it sharpens it, because you know how easily the hearth can go cold. You cherish the warmth of the fire, because you know how exhausting a day in the fields can be. You savor the feeling of resting your weary limbs. You have found a balance that many in the world outside, with their complex lives and endless distractions, will never know. As the shadows begin to lengthen, signaling the end of another day of growth and renewal, you feel a profound sense of peace. The world outside may be on the verge of profound change, and the future may be veiled in shadow, but here, in this small, hard-won space, you are grounded. You have created a life that is defined not by what you lack, but by what you nurture. You carry this sense of quiet, understated abundance with you as you move through your evening tasks. You are rich in the things that matter, in the rhythm of the seasons, in the work of your hands, and in the enduring, steady heartbeat of the life you have chosen to live. Looking back at the months that have passed, you realize that your life has been a silent witness to the unfolding of a monumental era. You entered this time of revolution, not as a hero of the battlefield, but as a sentinel of the everyday. You have weathered the winter's bite. You have felt the stirring of a nation's conscience in the village square, and you have witnessed the earth itself rise to meet the promise of a new season. This journey has not been one of grand gestures, but of quiet, cumulative endurance. The history books may eventually speak of 1776 in terms of major battles and the signatures of leaders, but they will rarely capture the smell of the smoke you banked at midnight or the physical weight of the tools that forged your future. They will not describe the collective unspoken resolve of neighbors who stood together during the harsh months, trusting in each other when the world outside grew chaotic. Yet you know that without this foundation, without the families who kept the fire burning and the land yielding, the grander history would have had no ground to stand upon. You have learned that history is not something that happens only to others. You are not just observing time, you are the vessel through which it flows. Every choice you made to prioritize the hearth, every sacrifice you made for the sake of the next generation has resonated through the years. You are a bridge between an ancient past and an unpredictable future. You have walked this path with a grace born of necessity, turning the struggle of existence into a tapestry of human resilience. As you stand in the threshold of your home, watching the last light of the day catch the edge of the woods, you feel the weight of this knowledge. The storm of change is still gathering, and the world will never be quite the same as it was when the year began. But you are different too. You are tempered. You have looked the uncertainty of the future in the eye and chosen to plant your seeds regardless. You have understood that whether a nation stands or falls, the human spirit is anchored in the ability to persist, to build, and to find meaning in the rhythm of the living world. You have played your part in the birth of something vast, even while your world remained small. And as the stars begin to emerge cold and bright above the tree line, you realize that your story, the story of every anonymous, hard-working person who dared to dream of a different life, is the real history of 1776. You are ready now. You have done your work. You have carried the torch through the long night, and you stand as a testament to the fact that even in the most turbulent of times, there is a quiet, enduring strength that defines what it means to be human. The midsummer air in the colonies is heavy, not just with the humidity that signals the ripening of the corn, but with a palpable electric tension. The news has finally arrived at the village, brought by a rider whose horse was flecked with foam, bearing a printed broadside that feels heavier than the parchment it is pressed upon. It is a document from Philadelphia. For weeks, the talk had been of a declaration, but now the abstract concept has materialized into ink and paper. It is the language of a formal divorce from an empire that once felt as eternal as the North Star. As you stand among your neighbors, watching the local magistrate read the words aloud, you notice a profound shift in the silence that follows. The language is bold: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are not merely phrases in the context of your daily labor. They ring with the clarity of a church bell. You realize that the struggle you have endured, the taxes on the tea, the restrictions on your trade, the arbitrary laws that seem to disregard the sweat you poured into the land, was not a series of isolated grievances. It was a symptom of a fundamental incompatibility between the crown's ambitions and the reality of life in the wilderness. The political geography of your world has fractured. You see it in the faces around you. Some men look toward the horizon with a newfound terrifying sense of agency. Others look at their homes, their fields, and their children, gripped by a sudden sharp fear of the cost this independence will demand. You are no longer merely a subject of a distant king. You are being asked to become a citizen of a nation that does not yet fully exist. A nation currently being birthed in the fires of dissent. The revolution has crossed the threshold from a political debate into an existential choice. This is the moment where the history of 1776 ceases to be about the gentlemen in powdered wigs at the Continental Congress and becomes about the decision of the common man. You walk back to your farm, the document tucked into your pocket, and you look at your fences, your tools, and your barn. You understand that this land, which you have claimed through blood and toil, is now at the center of an unprecedented gamble. If you support this declaration, you are a patriot. If you hesitate, you are a loyalist. The neutrality you once clung to, the hope that the storm would pass over your head, has vanished. You sit at your table that night, the candle flickering low, and you think of the soldiers gathering in camps, the ships patrolling the coast, and the immense weight of the British Empire turning its gaze toward these shores. The reality of war is no longer a rumour from the coast. It is a possibility that could reach your doorstep before the harvest is complete. Yet, as you hold your partner's hand, you realise that the idea of independence has taken root in your mind. It is a strange, wild growth, one that suggests that perhaps for the first time in history you are not just a cog in an imperial machine, but the architect of your own fate. The summer night is warm, but there is a chill in your bones, not from the weather, but from the realization that the world you knew is being dismantled, piece by piece, to make room for something that has no name yet. The summer of 1776 does not just bring the heat, it brings a poisonous strain to the village community. The declaration, once a beacon of hope for some, has become a wedge that splits families and neighbours down the middle. You witness friendships, forged over decades of shared harvests and winter hardships, dissolve in a matter of weeks. The tavern, once a place for news and camaraderie, is now a site of tense, whispered confrontations where the word patriot is spat out like an insult by some and worn as a badge of honour by others. You find yourself in a delicate position. Your closest neighbour, a man whose hands have worked the soil beside yours for years, holds a firm belief in the legitimacy of the crown. He sees the revolution as a lawless rebellion that will only bring ruin, hunger, and the chaotic collapse of order. You see him not as an enemy, but as a man of tradition who fears for his family's safety. Yet the air between you has grown cold. When you meet at the fence line, the easy banter has been replaced by an uncomfortable guarded silence. The trust that was once the bedrock of your survival is now corroded by political ideology. The reality of the war is no longer a distant abstraction. It is felt in the sudden scarcity of goods. Merchants are hesitant to trade, afraid of which side will eventually emerge victorious. The colonial militias are beginning to call for men, your neighbours, your brothers, even your own sons, demanding they take up arms. This is the moment where the idealism of the declaration meets the brutal reality of mobilization. You see mothers weeping as they sew uniforms from whatever fabric they can spare, and you see the grim, hollow look in the eyes of young men who have never held a musket, but are now being told they are soldiers of a new nation. The landscape itself seems to reflect this turmoil. The fields once tended with a collective sense of purpose now seem neglected as men are drawn away to drill or to guard the coastal roads. You realize that the unity of the village is the first casualty of this revolution. The patriot and the loyalist are no longer just labels. They are defining lines that determine who will talk to whom, who will trade with whom, and who will turn their back when help is needed. Sitting on your porch, watching the dusk settle over the fractured village, you feel the weight of a painful truth. A nation is being born, but the labour is violent and tearing at the very fabric of the people it is meant to serve. The silence of the night no longer feels like peace. It feels like a held breath, waiting for the inevitable arrival of a conflict that will force every man, woman, and child to choose a side. You are no longer just a farmer tending the earth. You are a witness to the profound, tragic cost of self-determination. You realize that history is not just made of progress, it is carved out of the broken pieces of what used to be. The rumours of marching boots finally materialize into the rhythmic, muffled thud of a column approaching on the main road. It is not a grand battle, not yet, but the arrival of a detachment of troops. Whether they are Continental regulars in worn homespun or British redcoats in disciplined formation, their presence instantly alters the gravity of the village. The quiet lanes, once used only for the passage of carts and livestock, are now consumed by the dust and the imposing energy of armed men. This is the moment the conflict ceases to be a philosophy and becomes an immediate, terrifying reality. You watch from the edge of your property as the soldiers requisition supplies. It is done with a cold, impersonal efficiency that treats your hard-earned grain, your livestock, and your tools as mere resources to be consumed by the war effort. You see a neighbour protesting, his voice high and frantic, only to be silenced by the cold stare of an officer whose authority comes from the barrel of a musket. You realize then that in this landscape of revolution, the individual is utterly vulnerable. The liberty spoken of in the Declaration feels suddenly very fragile when held against the overwhelming force of military necessity. The psychological toll is deeper than the material loss. Your cabin, once an impenetrable sanctuary of familial peace, now feels exposed. You find yourself pacing the floor at night, listening to the distance, waiting for the sound of knocking or the flicker of firelight that shouldn't be there. The darkness of the forest, once your comfort, now hides the eyes of patrols and scouts. Every shadow, every rustle of the leaves is a potential threat. The profound sense of security you had spent years building has been replaced by a constant low-level vigilance, a state of being that is exhausting, soul-draining, and persistent. Yet even in this fear, you witness a new kind of quiet courage. You see women sharing what little flour they have left, hiding the last of their livestock in the dense thickets, and creating secret networks of communication to warn one another of approaching units. The community, though fractured by politics, is finding a new, desperate form of solidarity in the face of the common danger. They are protecting the harvest, protecting the children, and protecting the embers of their lives from the wind of war that seeks to blow them out. As night falls, you find yourself sitting by the fire, your hand resting on a heavy iron hearth tool. A pathetic defense against a disciplined soldier, but a necessary comfort for your own mind. You listen to the distant rhythmic clatter of the soldiers moving on toward the coast, and you wonder how much of your world will remain when they are gone. You are no longer just witnessing history, you are caught in its gears. You have learned that the cost of independence is not paid only in ink or in speeches, but in the relentless daily sacrifice of the common man. You are the soil upon which this war is fought, and you are waiting with the stoic patience of the land itself to see what will grow from the ashes. The troops have moved on, leaving behind a silence that is heavier than before. The village is physically scarred. Fences are broken, trampled crops mark where camps once stood, and the storehouses are unnervingly empty. The dust has settled, but the air is still thick with the lingering scent of wood smoke and the anxiety of what might follow. You stand in your field looking at the bent stalks of corn, and for a moment you feel a surge of profound weariness. It is the exhaustion of someone who has seen their careful preparations, the fruits of an entire season of labour, swept away by forces they cannot control. But then you look at your neighbours one by one. They emerge from their homes not with weapons but with tools. You see the smith restarting his forge, the sound of the hammer ringing out against the anvil, a sharp, defiant rhythm that cuts through the stillness. You see a mother mending a gate, her movements deliberate and focused. There is no grand fanfare, no speeches of triumph or despair. There is only the quiet, unrelenting work of repair. This is the unsung reality of the revolution, the constant grinding necessity of rebuilding what war has taken. You join them. There is a deep, primal satisfaction in rebuilding a fence, in weeding the soil, in restoring order to the chaos. You realize that this is your true act of resistance. The war may be a struggle for ideology and power, but your life is a struggle for continuity. By fixing your home, by planting the next row of seeds, you are asserting that your existence matters, that no king or army can extinguish the fundamental human drive to cultivate, to nurture, and to endure. This period of recovery is also a time of quiet reflection. You see how the community has shifted. The ideological lines have not disappeared, but they are momentarily obscured by the shared burden of survival. People who wouldn't speak to one another a week ago now share a hammer or help lift a heavy beam. The necessity of life has overridden the volatility of politics. It is a fragile peace, but it is one you hold on to with everything you have. You learn to value the small things again, the integrity of a well-mended tool, the warmth of a shared meal, the simple fact that for today the world is still yours. As the sun sets, casting long golden shadows across the repaired fields, you feel a sense of tempered strength. You are not the same person you were before the soldiers arrived. You are more cautious, perhaps, but also more resilient. You understand now that the foundation of the nation is not found only in the grand declarations of Philadelphia, but in the calloused hands of people who, after every storm, simply pick up their tools and begin again. You have survived the passage of the tide, and as the stars begin to peer through the evening sky, you know that tomorrow you will wake up and do it all over again. You are the heartbeat of the land, and the land in its quiet, eternal way is holding you close. The autumn of 1776 brings with it a crisp, melancholic chill that bites deeper than before. The harvest is in meagre compared to years past, yet held onto with a fierce possessiveness. There is a strange new sensation in your chest whenever you look at your maples turning gold. You are not just gathering for the winter, you are preparing for a future that feels entirely unwritten. The war has drifted into a rhythm of its own, a series of distant skirmishes and strategic movements that seem to dictate the pace of everything. You are no longer just living on the land, you are living in the shadow of a revolution. You find yourself becoming a quiet observer of the political shift. The pamphlets that once seemed like radical musings are now treated as essential guides to this new, fragile reality. You read them by the dying light of the fire, tracing the lines of ink with fingers roughened by the plough. The words sovereignty, self-governance, tyranny have migrated from the halls of Congress into your own vocabulary. They have become the markers by which you measure your own life. You are starting to understand that you are not just a spectator to history, you are the ground upon which its legitimacy is tested. There is a profound, almost heavy awareness of the responsibility that now rests on your shoulders. If the war is lost, your life will be a footnote to a failed rebellion. If it is won, the world you pass down to your children will be unrecognizable. This uncertainty is not a fear, but a weight, a gravity that pulls you toward a deeper sense of purpose. You stop asking what will happen to me and start asking what must be done. The shift in perspective is subtle, yet it alters every action you take. In the village, the tension has matured into a somber, disciplined resolve. Even those who were once the most vocal in their doubts have fallen into a wary, protective silence. The community is learning to move as one, not necessarily out of shared belief, but out of a shared necessity to survive the coming winter of the revolution. You see it in the way the local militia drills. Their movements are clumsy and lack the polished precision of a standing army, but they possess a grim, focused intensity that is harder to break. You are watching a nation form itself out of the raw material of ordinary people. As you stand in the threshold of your home tonight, listening to the dry rustle of leaves against the cabin wall, you feel a connection to the horizon that you have never felt before. The landscape is no longer just your domain, it is a territory. You are a guardian of this place, not just for yourself, but for the idea of a life lived by your own design. The air is cold, the night is deep, and the future is a dark, vast forest, yet you stand firm. You have weathered the cycles of the year, and you have survived the intrusions of the war. You are ready for the long, quiet vigil of the months ahead, knowing that you have already done more than simply exist. You have persisted, and in that persistence you have played your part in defining the soul of a nation. The winter of 1776 is not merely a season, it is an adversary. The snow falls in such relentless heavy sheets that it buries the road to the village, effectively turning your farm into an island of wood and hearth fire in a sea of white. For weeks, there is no news from the Continental Army, no travellers with fresh pamphlets, and no gossip from the tavern. The silence is profound, a heavy, muffled blanket that amplifies every crack of the log in the fireplace and every gust of wind against the heavy timber of your walls. This isolation is a crucible. Without the distractions of the outside world, your mind turns inward. You spend the long dark hours in a state of deep forced introspection. You think of the men in the camps, the soldiers in their tattered coats, standing guard in this very same cold, and you realize that your struggle, while quiet, is a parallel to theirs. You are both holding on against an indifferent force. The war has retreated into the background of your consciousness, replaced by the immediate binary reality of heat versus cold, life versus starvation. In this stillness, your priorities strip down to their absolute essence. The grand political debates of the summer seem distant, almost dreamlike. What matters now is the structural integrity of your roof, the remaining depth of your grain bin, and the warmth of the living bodies huddled around the fire. You find yourself performing the tasks of survival with a meditative precision. You sharpen your axe until it glints like silver. You mend your heavy woolens with slow, deliberate stitches. You have become the master of your small, immediate sphere. It is during these nights that the true nature of your independence becomes clear. It is not found in the documents signed in Philadelphia. It is found in this ability to survive the dark on your own terms. You are not waiting for an army to save you, nor are you relying on the charity of a distant crown. You're relying on your own foresight, your own labour, and the strength of the community you have quietly nurtured. This is the ultimate form of self-governance, the mastery of one's own survival against the harshest elements the world can offer. As you stare into the embers of the fire, the orange glow illuminating the faces of your loved ones, you realize that the revolution has already succeeded in one respect. It has broken your dependence on the old fragile structures of the past. You have been forced to become self-sufficient, to trust in your own agency, and to find beauty in the sheer act of enduring. The world outside is frozen, paused in a state of suspended animation, but within your heart something is hardening, becoming resilient and ready. You are waiting for the thaw, but you no longer fear the cold. You have discovered that you are made of the same stubborn, enduring material as the land itself. The thaw is slow, agonizingly gradual, but it carries a promise that the winter has finally exhausted its power. As the snow recedes from the fields, revealing the mud and the promise of dormant soil, the first messengers begin to appear on the horizon. They are the heralds of a world that has been moving even while you were held in silence. The silence of the winter is replaced by the return of sound, the creaking of wagon wheels, the distant calls of men, and the renewed pulse of a world shaking off its icy shackles. The news they bring is a complex tapestry. There are stories of battles fought in the bitter cold, tales of a continental army that somehow survived the winter through sheer stubborn defiance. You hear names you've never known, places far from your valley that have now become sites of monumental sacrifice. You listen to these reports with a detachment that slowly gives way to an intense personal connection. You realize that while you were tending your own hearth, the nation was being forged in the frozen camps of the South. The war has not ended, it has merely evolved, and its reach is wider than you ever imagined. You find yourself walking your boundary lines again, checking the fences that the weight of the snow had bowed. The land looks different now. The war has changed the way you view every acre. You see the soil not just as a place to plant, but as a territory that demands defense. You are no longer the same person who looked at the fields last spring. That person was a subject, wondering if the world would stay the same. Now you are a guardian, fully aware that the world you seek to maintain is the very thing the revolution is trying to secure. There is a strange, bittersweet quality to this rebirth of spring. You see the buds on the trees and the first shoots of green, but you also see the empty cabins of those who did not make it through the winter, or those who left to fight and never returned. The cost of this struggle is becoming etched into the geography of the village. The spring does not just bring life, it highlights what has been lost, yet you also see a new determination in the eyes of those who remain. They are not waiting for life to return to how it was before. They are actively shaping what it will become next. You stand by the river, watching the ice break apart and rush downstream in chaotic, tumbling shards. It is a violent, beautiful transformation, the old ice giving way to the living water. You realize that you too are being carried forward by this current. The choice of 1776 is no longer a question to be answered. It is a reality to be lived. You have survived the winter of the revolution, and as you turn back toward your home, you carry the heavy, essential knowledge that you have not just survived. You have grown into the person who can weather whatever the summer of this war may bring. Spring has arrived in full force, turning the landscape into a vibrant, deceptive tapestry of green. If you didn't know better, you would think the world was at peace, but the air carries a different charge. The daily rhythms of the farm are now conducted in the shadow of mobilization. You plough the fields with a musket leaned against a nearby tree, a silent partner in your work. This is the new reality of 1776, the synthesis of the ploughshare and the sword. You have learned that true independence is not merely the absence of a king, but the constant, vigilant defense of one's own labor. The village has evolved into a logistical hub. You and your neighbours no longer debate the why of the war, you focus entirely on the how of sustaining it. The blacksmith is no longer shoeing horses for pleasure, he is forging hardware for the militia. The women are spinning wool not just for winter cloaks, but for the uniforms that are desperately needed at the front. You have all become cogs in a massive, improvised machine of survival. It is exhausting, but it has granted you a clarity that you lacked before. You are no longer living for yourself alone, you are part of a collective effort to secure a future that belongs to no one but you. There is a profound sense of maturation in the air. The local youth, who only a year ago were boys chasing chores, now walk with the deliberate, heavy gait of men who have seen the volatility of the world. They talk of supply lines and militia drills with a gravity that belies their age. You look at them and see the future of the nation not as polished soldiers, but as free men who understand the price of their autonomy. You feel a quiet, immense pride. You have raised them in the shelter of your hearth, but they are now stepping out into the storm, ready to hold their own. You find yourself frequently stopping to look at the horizon, sensing that the tide is about to turn once more. The rumours are no longer just rumours, they are the rhythmic drums of approaching history. You know that the period of transition, the long grinding year of preparation and persistence, is nearing its end. Soon the test will not be of your patience or your ability to survive the winter, but of your resolve in the face of absolute decision. The nation is no longer a concept, it is an entity being tested in the fire, and you are its foundation. As the sun sets, casting a long, steady glow over the freshly turned earth, you feel a moment of profound, anchored peace. You have done the work, you have cleared the land, you have survived the cold, you have endured the fracture of your community, and you have remained steadfast in your purpose. You are ready for what comes next. You are not a hero of the legends, but you are something more vital. You are the bedrock upon which the legend is built. The night is quiet, but it is not empty. It is filled with the promise of a future you helped bring into existence, one small hard-won day at a time. There is a particular hour in the late afternoon, just as the sun begins to bleed its amber light across the valley, when the world seems to hold its breath. You stand at the edge of your property, your hands resting on the rough-hewn timber of a fence you built with your own toil. You realize that you have reached a threshold. The year of 1776 has been more than a mere passage of time. It has been a crucible that has melted away the person you were and forged something new in your place. You look down at the valley, at the cabin, the garden, the small patches of light beginning to flicker in the distance as evening draws near. For a long time you viewed these as your world, but now you see them as something more. They are the cells of a living, breathing nation. Every act of kindness you showed a neighbour during the bitter winter, every seed you planted with the resolve that this land was yours to protect, and every moment you chose to stand firm against fear, these were not isolated actions, they were the heartbeat of a revolution. You understand now that history is not just the grand movements of armies or the parchment declarations of statesmen, it is the sum of these small, quiet, daily victories of the human spirit. You feel a strange, calm detachment from the anxiety that once defined your days. The uncertainty of the future, the looming threat of conflict, and the political tremors that continue to ripple through the colonies no longer feel like a burden to be carried in isolation. They are the conditions of a new existence. You have learned that liberty is not a gift bestowed from above. It is a weight to be carried, a responsibility to be honored, and a garden to be constantly tended. You are no longer afraid of the storm because you have become part of the landscape that endures it. In your mind you can see the years ahead, a vast hazy horizon where the name of this nation will be carved into the fabric of the world. You will likely not be there to see the final fruit of this labour, and your name may never be etched into the annals of the great, but that no longer matters. You have realized that your life is a link in a chain that stretches far beyond your own reach. You have kept the flame, you have protected the hearth, and you have remained true to the values of independence and resilience. That is enough. The stars are beginning to pierce the violet sky, cold and distant, yet they feel familiar. You turn back toward the cabin, the scent of wood smoke, the smell of home, of survival, of life, greeting you like a promise. You have done all that one person can do. You have lived through the birth of an era, and in doing so you have found your own place in the grand unfolding story of humanity. You are ready for whatever comes with the dawn, for you have discovered the most profound truth of all, that no matter how turbulent the winds of history become, as long as you have the strength to stand and the heart to build, you are never truly lost. The night is quiet, save for the rhythmic, steady sound of the wind through the tall pines that border your land. You sit by the hearth, the fire casting long, dancing shadows against the walls of the home you have built. You look at your hands, scarred, calloused and darkened by the sun, and you see the history of this place written upon your skin. You realize that you have not just labored for yourself or even for your family, you have been cultivating the future. Every furrow you have ploughed into the earth, every stone you have moved, and every winter you have survived has been a silent protest against the encroaching chaos of war. You have created an anchor in a world that is adrift. You understand now that the true strength of a nation is not found in the manifestos of its founders, but in the stubborn, quiet persistence of those who choose to stay and build, day after grueling day. You are the heartbeat of the land, the pulse that keeps the nation alive even when the world seems determined to tear it apart. You think of the generations yet to come, those who will walk these same paths, clear the same woods, and look out over this same valley. They will never know your name, and they will likely never understand the specific weight of the fear you carried or the specific joy of the harvest you reaped, but they will inherit the foundation you have laid. The independence they enjoy, the freedom to speak, to work, and to dream, will be the fruit of the seeds you are planting right now. You are the invisible architect, the silent sentinel of a legacy that transcends time. There is a profound, quiet dignity in this realization. You are no longer bothered by the obscurity of your life. You have found a greater purpose. You are the link between the past and the future, the steady hand that guides the life of the land through the storm. You have accepted that your struggle is your signature, written not in ink but in the earth itself. The revolution may be a storm that reshapes the world, but you are the mountain that refuses to bow. As you watch the final embers of the fire begin to fade into grey, you feel a deep, unshakable peace. You are not a figure in a history book, but you are something more substantial. You are a living, breathing testament to the human capacity to endure, to create, and to hope. The morning will come, with its own challenges and its own mysteries. But for this moment, you are whole, you have lived, you have laboured, and you have mattered. You close your eyes, content, knowing that the foundation holds firm, and that the story you have written with your life will endure, long after the fires of this revolution have turned to ash. In the late spring of 1776, the very language of the valley has begun to change. Words like subject, fealty, and crown are being discarded, replaced by a vocabulary of sovereignty, representation, and compact. You listen to the debates in the village square, where a travelling printer, a man with ink-stained fingers and a wild glint in his eyes, distributes leaflets that argue for the necessity of a government derived from the consent of the governed. To you who have spent your life consenting only to the cycles of the seasons and the demands of the soil, this is a radical, vertigo-inducing thought. The shift is not instantaneous, nor is it easy. It is a slow, grinding process of mental decolonization. You and your neighbours find yourselves debating the nature of rights, not as privileges granted by a distant monarch, but as inherent qualities of a free man. You watch as the local committee of safety, a small group of men elected from among yourselves, begins to exercise functions that were once the sole purview of royal magistrates. They resolve land disputes, oversee the distribution of dwindling supplies, and organize the defense of the region. You realize that you are witnessing the birth of a local grassroots sovereignty that functions entirely independent of the old imperial bureaucracy. This new order is fragile, and it is governed by a raw, often uncomfortable accountability. Every decision made in the village has immediate, tangible consequences. If the committee fails to secure grain, your family goes hungry. If the militia fails to guard the pass, your home is at risk. There is no hiding behind the shield of imperial distance anymore. The revolution has brought the weight of governance directly to your doorstep. You find that you have a voice, and more importantly, a vote in how these matters are handled. It is a terrifying responsibility. You observe the women of the valley playing an increasingly pivotal role in this new architecture. With the men distracted by drilling and patrolling, they have become the primary administrators of the local economy, managing the harvest, controlling the flow of goods, and maintaining the social fabric that holds the community together. Their influence is quiet, yet it is the bedrock upon which the entire rebellion rests. They are the ones who articulate the resilience that keeps the community from fracturing under the pressure of war. You realize that this revolution is not just a military conflict, it is a total social transformation, one where the traditional hierarchies are being challenged and in some places entirely dismantled. As you walk back to your cabin, the evening mist rolling in from the forest, you consider the magnitude of what is happening. You are no longer just a farmer living in a remote colony. You are an architect of a new political reality. You have participated in the creation of a community that manages its own destiny. The uncertainty is still there, a constant hum in the background of your life, but it is tempered by a newfound sense of agency. You are no longer waiting for the world to decide your fate. You are actively engaged in the construction of a future that is, for the first time, your own to determine. The long night of 1776 is far from over, but for the first time you feel the sunrise of a new, albeit difficult dawn. By midsummer of 1776, the fervour that once swept through the colonies has sharpened into something more sombre, a steady, crushing weight. The news from Philadelphia, the talk of a formal declaration of independence, is no longer a cause for celebration in your home. It has become a ledger of debts to be paid. You look at your children, their faces thin from the scarcity of a wartime economy, and you realize that liberty is not a concept that feeds them. You have traded the predictability of the Crown's order for the volatile, dangerous promise of self-governance. Every evening, you sit with your partner and discuss the precariousness of your situation. You do not talk of the grand debates or the natural rights of man that the pamphleteers wax poetic about. You talk of the supply of salt, the wear on your boots, and the fact that if a British patrol rides through the valley, the meagre harvest you are coaxing from the soil will be the first thing they seize. The rhetoric of revolution feels hollow when measured against the silence of a cupboard, yet you both know that returning to the old ways is an impossibility. The bridge has been burned, and there is no retreating to the comfort of a master who did not understand the land you cultivated. This is the hidden theatre of the war, the kitchen table. It is here, in the flickering light of a tallow candle, that the most important decisions are made. You debate whether to send your eldest son to the militia. It is not an abstract choice about patriotism. It is a calculation of whether he is more needed to protect the homestead or to fight for the future. You feel the crushing tension of wanting to protect him from the fire, while knowing that if the fire burns the entire nation, he will have no future to inherit anyway. You have learned that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to make such agonizing choices while keeping a steady hand on the plough. You see your neighbours grappling with the same invisible, agonizing arithmetic. The village is quiet, not because of peace, but because everyone is busy counting the cost. The camaraderie that once existed is now strained by the fear that one of you might be a secret sympathizer to the king, a risk that turns every handshake into a gamble. The social fabric is frayed, held together only by the shared, desperate necessity of keeping your families alive while the world outside tears itself apart in the name of an idea. You are realizing that a nation is not built on speeches, it is built on the willingness of ordinary people to endure the slow, grinding erosion of their private peace for a public benefit they may never live to fully enjoy. As the crickets begin their persistent shrill song in the tall grass, you step out onto your porch. The stars are bright and indifferent to the turmoil below. You think of the men in distant cities, drafting documents that will change the course of centuries, and you feel a strange mix of anger and awe. You are the one who will pay for their prose with your labor, your risk, and your quiet, relentless sacrifice. You take a deep breath of the humid night air, settling into the realization that you are not a bystander to this history. You are the foundation, the silent, weary, and resolute base upon which this new experiment is being erected. You have accepted the burden, and for tonight that is enough to let you sleep. The summer sun of 1776 has begun to wane, leaving the fields in a state of golden, heavy stillness. But it is a deceptive peace. Word has travelled inland that the Continental Congress has done more than just talk. They have put their lives and property on the line. The document, the declaration, has begun to circulate in ways that are both exhilarating and terrifying. It is no longer a radical pamphlet written by intellectuals. It is a formal severance of ties that binds every colonist, whether they wish it or not, to the fate of this new fragile independence. You notice the shift in the village atmosphere. The casual, often aimless chatter at the blacksmith's or the grain mill has become pointed, guarded, and serious. The talk now revolves around logistics, where to store the grain away from the gaze of passing military detachments, how to organize a local network of scouts, and which men are truly committed to the cause. The revolution has ceased to be a topic of conversation. It has become a strategy of daily survival. You realize that the neutrality you once guarded, your hope that the war would simply bypass your valley, was a luxury you can no longer afford. The storm has not passed you by, it is settling in, and you must decide whether to be the tree that breaks or the willow that bends. You look at your own tools, the iron plough, the heavy shears, the sharpening stone. They are the instruments of your life, yet you find yourself wondering how they might be repurposed if the enemy reaches this threshold. You see your neighbours, people you have known since childhood, now looking at each other with a new sober awareness. There is a quiet understanding that a line has been crossed, a Rubicon of the soul. No matter how the war ends, the colonial world of 1775 is dead. A new, harder, more demanding reality has taken its place, and you are being forged in the heat of this transition. The information from the coast is fragmented but constant. Tales of skirmishes, of ships blockading harbours, and of the mobilization of vast professional armies filtering through the channels of the frontier. It is a slow, relentless erosion of your isolation. You are learning that to be a citizen of a nation in birth is to lose the safety of anonymity. The tax on your grain, the requisition of your horses, and the constant demand for men to serve in the militia are the visible threads of the web being woven around you. You are part of the machinery of a revolution that you didn't start, but one that you are now inextricably bound to sustain. As the sun sets, casting long, deep shadows that stretch across the valley floor, you find yourself sitting on the threshold of your home, observing the horizon. The woods are dark and silent, yet you feel as though the entire landscape is waiting, holding its breath. You understand that the coming months will demand everything you have, your resilience, your labour, and your resolve. You look at your hands, calloused from the work of the earth, and you accept your role in this unfolding history. You are the silent, constant witness to a birth that is as violent as it is necessary. You are ready. The autumn harvest of 1776 is being brought in under a cloud of uncertainty that feels heavier than the frost-laden air. There is a strange, jarring dissonance in the atmosphere. On one hand, the exhilarating rhetoric of the new declaration, speaking of natural rights and the dignity of man, and on the other, the brutal, immediate reality of requisitioning officers knocking at your door to demand a portion of your yield for the Continental Army. You are being asked to provide the fuel for a fire that may well consume your own homestead. You witness a profound shift in how justice is perceived. In the old days, law was something that descended from the crown, remote and immutable. Now justice is something you have to negotiate among yourselves. When a neighbour's barn burns, or when a dispute arises over the rights to a stretch of timber, there is no distant magistrate to settle the matter. You and the men of the village sit on rough-hewn benches, adjudicating with a sense of communal responsibility that is as messy as it is necessary. You are learning that to be a free man is not just to possess rights, it is to bear the heavy burden of duty to one's neighbour. The conflict of values is most visible in the faces of the young. You see them struggling to reconcile the heroic tales they hear about the revolution with the sight of their fathers exhausted, broken and fearful. They are growing up in a world where the lines between patriot and enemy are constantly shifting, defined more by immediate survival than by abstract loyalty. You worry for them. You wonder if this baptism of fire will forge them into a generation of leaders, or if it will simply leave them hardened and cynical, their spirits cauterized by the sights of war. Yet amidst this erosion of the old world, you observe flickers of something entirely new, a nascent, collective identity. You find that your neighbours, regardless of their original political leanings, are slowly binding together. A common language of survival has emerged, a shared understanding that whatever happens in the halls of Philadelphia, it is here, in the valley, that the strength of the nation is being tested. You are no longer just a collection of individuals living on adjacent plots of land. You are becoming a singular organism, a community that defines itself by its refusal to be broken by external forces. As you stand in your field, the late afternoon sun casting long pale rays across the stubble, you realize that you are being transformed. The man who began this year, hopeful and detached, has been replaced by someone far more grounded, more stoic, and deeply aware of the price of his own existence. You have learned that independence is not a sudden epiphany. It is the slow, arduous, and daily accumulation of small, brave choices. You are no longer merely a farmer. You are the silent, steadfast bedrock of a republic that is yet to be born. You have weathered the trials of the year, and as the darkness settles, you feel a quiet, immense strength rising within you, the strength of a soul that has truly touched the ground of its own history. The year is coming to a close, and the air is brittle with the impending frost of a new winter. As you look out over your fields, the soil now turned and resting, the fences mended for the cold, you recognize a change in the atmosphere that transcends the shifting seasons. The news from the front is no longer a collection of scattered rumors. It is beginning to form a cohesive narrative of a nation refusing to collapse. You realize that the resilience you cultivated in the isolation of your farm was not an anomaly. It was a microcosm of what was happening across every valley, every forest, and every settlement in the colonies. You see it in the way the local blacksmith now talks, with a deliberate, measured tone that reflects the weight of national purpose. You see it in the eyes of the mothers in the village, whose grief for their sons lost to the war has transformed into a fierce, steel-edged resolve. You have collectively crossed a threshold where the idea of independence has moved from the pamphlets in Philadelphia into the very marrow of your daily existence. You are no longer just people living under a government, you are the people who are creating one. This is the profound invisible alchemy of 1776, the conversion of fear into a steadfast national consciousness. You reflect on the price of this transformation. It has been a year of erosion. You have lost the certainty of your former life, you have seen the fragility of your neighbour's trust, and you have borne the relentless anxiety of a world at war. Yet in this loss, you have gained something that cannot be stripped away by decree or conquest. You have gained the knowledge of your own agency. You know now that you are capable of surviving the vacuum of authority, of governing yourself through the shared necessity of survival, and of standing firm when the winds of empire threaten to sweep you away. This is the bedrock of what will eventually be called a citizen. History, as you now understand it, is not merely the grand sweep of armies or the proclamations of great men. It is the silent, enduring work of the people who hold the line when no one is watching. It is the cumulative effect of 1,000 hearths kept warm, 1,000 fields sown in defiance of uncertainty, and 1,000 small acts of communal solidarity. You are the heartbeat of the revolution. Your personal struggle, and the struggle of your community, has been the engine that has kept the dream of this nation alive through its most vulnerable, embryonic stage. As the first snow begins to fall, dusting the valley in a soft white silence, you turn away from the door and retreat into the warmth of your home. The hearth is bright, the food is gathered, and your resolve is absolute. You understand now that you are not just a spectator to history. You have helped write it with every choice you made this year. The dawn of 1777 is approaching, and with it the certainty of more hardship and more challenges. But for the first time in your life, you are not afraid of what lies ahead. You have discovered that you are a part of something much larger than yourself, a legacy of endurance that will stretch long into the future, written in the soil, the spirit, and the unyielding will of a free people. As the year draws to a close, the cycle of the seasons, so fundamental to your life as a farmer, feels entirely different. You have lived through a complete orbit of the sun, and yet the world you look upon as you stand on your threshold is not the same one you knew 12 months ago. The landscape is physically identical, but the social and political geography has been rewritten. You realize that there is no returning to the time before the Declaration. The silence of the winter woods is no longer a reprieve from the world. It is a space of consolidation for a reality that has fundamentally shifted. You consider the nature of the change you have witnessed. It was not birthed in the grand halls of power, but in the kitchens, the workshops, and the fields of ordinary men and women. You have learned that a nation is not a legal fiction. It is a shared psychological space. By choosing to hold your ground, by choosing to support your neighbour, and by choosing to act with civic responsibility in the absence of traditional authority, you have participated in an act of creation. You have transformed the passive identity of a subject into the active, demanding, and often burdensome identity of a citizen. This is the most profound revolution of all, the one that occurred within the minds of the people. You also recognize the cold, hard lesson of history. The price of autonomy is constant vigilance. The stability you once took for granted, the belief that the structure of society was permanent, has been replaced by the understanding that all structures are held up by the will of those who live within them. You are no longer under the illusion that order is something granted by a king. You know now that order is something you must maintain through your own labor and collective consensus. This realization is the true birth of the American spirit, a synthesis of agrarian resilience and political self-reliance that would define generations to come. As you look toward the horizon, where the faint light of a new year begins to gather, you feel no trepidation. You know that 1777 will bring its own trials. The war is far from over, and the path forward is obscured by the fog of conflict. But you are no longer the same person who stood in these fields a year ago. You have been tempered by uncertainty, hardened by the necessity of survival, and enlightened by the understanding of your own role in the machinery of history. You are an anchor of the new republic, a living testament to the fact that freedom is not an abstract ideal, but a daily, relentless practice. The hearth fire crackles, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the quiet room. You have done your part. You have tended the land, protected your own, and stood firm when the world shifted on its axis. You have learned that the story of a nation is not told in the grand declarations of its leaders, but in the silent, cumulative courage of the people who persist in the face of impossible odds. The year 1776 ends here, not with a flourish of trumpets, but with the quiet, determined resolution of a farmer preparing to plough his field once more. The foundation is laid. The future is waiting. The morning of the new year is exceptionally cold, a crisp, biting clarity that seems to sharpen the outlines of the world. You step outside, the frost crunching beneath your boots, and look out over the valley. The horizon remains the same, a rolling line of dark forest against a pale winter sky, but your perception of it has been forever altered. It is no longer just a view, it is a canvas upon which the future of a new nation is being painted. You realize that you have moved past the fear of what the war might take and have arrived at a place where you are concerned with what the peace will eventually build. History is often taught as a series of names, dates, and decisive battles, the thunder of cannons, the signing of treaties. But standing here, you know the truth, that history is, at its core, a conversation between the land and the people who tend it. You have been that conversation for the past year. Your daily struggle to remain upright, to feed your family, and to hold your community together has been the true pulse of the revolution. The grand events in distant cities are merely the shadows cast by the deep, quiet resolve of thousands of people like you. This is the silent architecture of democracy, built not with stone and mortar, but with the grit and endurance of the common man. You think of the generations who will stand in this very spot, decades, perhaps centuries from now. They will likely look back at this year as a turning point, a mythic time of great struggle. They will see the portraits of the founders and the maps of the battlefields, but they may never know the name of the person who stayed in the valley, who kept the fire burning, and who chose to believe in a future they would not live to see fully realized. And yet that is the most essential part of your legacy. You are not a hero of the monument. You are the foundation upon which the monument rests. The quiet, for a moment, is absolute. You take a breath, the cold air filling your lungs, and feel a sense of profound clarity. The war will continue, the path will be long, painful, and uncertain, but the tide has turned. You have moved from a state of questioning to a state of being. You are no longer waiting for permission to be free. You have claimed that freedom through the sheer act of surviving and building. You have anchored your life in the truth that you are the architect of your own destiny, and that is a power no king can ever revoke. You turn back toward the cabin, the warmth of the hearth beckoning. You have a long day ahead. The work of the farm never truly ends, regardless of the fate of nations. You pick up your tools, the familiar weight of them a comfort in your hands. You are ready for 1777. You are ready for the struggle, the labour, and the unknown. You walk forward, not with the trepidation of a subject, but with the steady, measured stride of a citizen. The story of the revolution is being written, and with every step you take, you are carving your own permanent mark into the bedrock of the future. There is a finality in the way the sun clears the tree line, a brilliance that feels like a verdict on all that has passed. You stand on the threshold of your home, not just as a farmer, but as a sentinel of a time that will become the cornerstone of a new world. It is the spring of 1777, and though the clouds of war still hang heavy on the horizon, the air itself feels different, infused with the stubborn, irrepressible scent of a future being born. You have come to understand that time is not a straight line, but a cycle of constant, grueling labour, and you have played your part in ensuring that the soil of this land remains fertile for the seeds of liberty. Think of what you have done. You did not sign the Declaration, you did not command the regiments, and your words were never recorded in the archives of the high and mighty. Yet consider the weight of your silence and your persistence. By refusing to abandon your hearth, by maintaining the integrity of your community when the social order seemed to disintegrate, and by choosing to nurture life in the face of death, you have acted as the true architect of the Republic. History is written by the victors, but it is built by the quiet, the steady, and the enduring. You are the heartbeat that the historians often miss, but without which the nation would have long since ceased to exist. As you look at the fields stretching out before you, you realize that your life is not a tragedy of wasted effort, but a triumph of continuity. The fence you mended will decay, the crops you planted will be harvested and forgotten, and eventually even the memory of your name will be swallowed by the long, deep reach of the centuries. But the act, the decision to be free, The refusal to submit and the commitment to build something better for those who follow is an echo that never truly dies. It is an energy that passes from hand to hand, from generation to generation, fueling the endless, often painful, but always necessary pursuit of a more perfect union. You recognize now that you are part of a grand, unfolding conversation that began long before you were born and will continue long after you are gone. You have taken the baton of human dignity and held it high through the darkest winter of 1776, ensuring that the light of autonomy was not extinguished. This is the greatest service any citizen can provide, to be the bedrock upon which the ideals of a people are anchored. You have stood as a guardian of the idea that humans are meant to be the masters of their own destiny, and that is a legacy that time cannot erode. The morning wind carries with it the distant, faint sound of a bell ringing from the village square, a call to work, a call to duty, a call to life. You take a final look at the horizon, where the light is now full and golden, bathing the valley in the promise of a day that is truly your own. You are no longer burdened by the past or paralyzed by the future. You are anchored firmly in the present, ready to do the work that is required of you. You are the embodiment of the revolution, a living, breathing testament to the idea that as long as there are people who choose to stand, to build, and to endure, the dream of freedom will never be extinguished. You are ready. The transition from 1776 to 1777 has not just marked a change in the calendar, it has shifted the very orientation of your soul. You watch your children moving through the chores of the morning, a motion that is fluid, instinctive, and devoid of the hesitant fear that defined them during the height of the summer's anxiety. They are growing up in a world that is inherently more dangerous, yet they carry themselves with a strange, burgeoning resilience. You realize that you have not just survived a war, you have successfully transmitted the survival instinct to the next generation. They are the true inheritors of the revolution, and they are stronger for having witnessed the crucible you endured. There is a profound, almost spiritual symmetry in this. You spent your youth breaking the raw earth, and now you're spending your maturity breaking the barriers of an old, stagnant order. The soil you cultivate and the political soil of the colonies are, in your eyes, one and the same. Both require the same fundamental inputs: labor, patience, and a refusal to yield to the volatility of the weather or the whim of kings. You have become the bridge. On one side lies the history of an imperial past that demanded submission. On the other lies a future where the status of a human being is defined by their own merit and the strength of their community. You notice that you no longer fear the unknown. The uncertainty of the war, the whispers of troop movements, the shortages, the shifting political alliances has become a constant, like the changing winds. You have stopped trying to predict the outcome of the grand theatre of conflict and have instead mastered the art of living within its presence. This is the ultimate mastery of the citizen, to be able to cultivate his garden even while the world around him is being reshaped by the tectonic forces of history. You are no longer just living through history, you are grounded in the present moment, fully conscious of the necessity of your own existence. The silence of the valley, once a heavy, suffocating thing, has transformed into a profound peace. It is the peace of someone who knows exactly where they stand. You look at your hands and you see the map of the year, the callouses, the scars, the dirt of the land that has become part of you. You are a testament to the fact that revolutions are not won by proclamations alone. They are won by the cumulative weight of 1,000 people refusing to leave their homes, refusing to stop working, and refusing to surrender their right to define their own lives. As you stand on your porch, watching the light reclaim the valley, you feel a deep, quiet gratitude. You have been granted the chance to exist at a moment of supreme transformation. You have seen the old world crumble and the foundations of the new one set in place. You are a footnote that has become a pillar. You are a simple farmer who has become the backbone of a republic. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the waking world, the birds, the wind, the steady rhythmic heartbeat of the earth, and you know that whatever the next year holds, you're ready. The foundation is laid, the work is begun, and the torch is already in the hands of those who will follow. The final lingering shadows of 1776 have vanished, and the dawn of 1777 arrives with a clarity that feels less like a conclusion and more like an initiation. You stand at the boundary of your land, the place where the tilled earth meets the wild, untamed forest. You have spent this past year in a state of constant, rhythmic labour, fighting not just the elements, but the gravity of an old world that desperately wanted to pull you back into its orbit of submission. You look out over the valley and you realize that the struggle you have endured was never the destination. It was merely the clearing of the ground. You have learned that history is not a static text kept in a library. It is a living, breathing continuity that demands constant participation. The freedom you now claim, the right to govern your own labour, to speak your own mind, and to forge a future for your children, is not a static prize to be guarded behind a fence. It is a vital, expansive force. You are no longer just the silent architect of your own homestead. You are a participant in a larger, unfolding design. The grand documents signed in the heat of summer were the blueprints. Now, the actual messy and exhilarating work of construction begins. You see the horizon not as a limit, but as an invitation. The path ahead remains marked by war, by sacrifice, and by the grueling work of building a society from the raw materials of hope and necessity. But the terror that once gnawed at the edges of your life has been replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. You have been through the fire of 1776, and you have come out tempered, not broken. You are no longer a subject hoping for mercy. You are a citizen who understands the weight and the privilege of his own agency. This is the lesson that keeps you moving, that the strength of a nation lies not in its leaders, but in the ordinary people who, when tested by the collapse of everything they once knew, chose not just to stand but to reach further. You turn back toward the cabin, and for the first time you view it not as a fortress, but as a seed. From here, the ideas of independence will ripple outward. Your neighbours, once fearful and isolated, are beginning to talk of schools, of local councils, and of ways to ensure that the harvest of the coming years benefits more than just the few. You are witnessing the birth of a social fabric that is more resilient than the iron of any crown. The revolution is moving from the battlefield into the very structure of your daily lives, and you are at the heart of it. The sun is high now, full and radiant, illuminating the fields that have been your battleground, your source of life and your classroom. You pick up your tools, the familiar weight in your hands, a reminder of all you have built and all you are prepared to nurture. You walk out into the field, not to merely plough the earth, but to plant the ideas that will grow alongside your crops. You are not looking back, nor are you standing still. You are ready to build a world that is yet to be defined. The harvest is not just the grain in the bin, it is the freedom that will echo across the centuries. Your work here is not done, it has only just begun. The early months of 1777 have brought a winter of discontent that tests the very marrow of your resolve. The initial euphoria of independence has been tempered by the harsh, biting cold and the reality of a war that refuses to be short or decisive. The supply lines once promised by the continental authorities have frayed to nothing. In your valley, the reality of liberty is measured in the depth of a grain bin and the thickness of a woolen cloak. You find that the most dangerous enemy is not the British redcoat marching toward the coast, but the creeping, silent spectre of scarcity that threatens to dissolve the unity you worked so hard to build. You attend a village meeting where the tension is palpable. The blacksmith, usually the voice of steady confidence, now speaks with a weary, jagged edge. He asks the question that everyone fears: how much longer can we hold the line before we ourselves are consumed by the very cause we seek to protect? You look around the room at faces worn thin by anxiety and hunger. The high-minded rhetoric of the previous year, of natural rights and the sovereignty of the people, sounds distant and hollow against the backdrop of empty larders. You realize that ideology is a fragile luxury. It requires a baseline of security that no longer exists. The rifts are beginning to show. Some of your neighbors, once vocal supporters of the revolution, have begun to hedge their bets, talking in hushed tones about the practicality of reconciliation with the crown. They are not traitors in the classic sense. They are simply people whose threshold for suffering has been reached. You find yourself in a delicate position. You must be the bridge between those who demand total, uncompromising sacrifice and those who are silently breaking under the weight of it. You have become an arbiter of faith, tasked with maintaining the fragile cohesion of a community that is fraying at the edges. This is the hidden struggle of the revolution that the history books will likely overlook, the battle for the human spirit amidst the mundane indignities of war. You have to decide how to allocate the last of the seed corn, knowing that to save it for spring is to risk the starvation of a neighbor's child today. Each decision feels like a moral compromise. You have learned that being a citizen is not a clean, heroic state of being. It is a dirty, agonizing process of choosing which loss is the least catastrophic. As you walk home through the biting nocturnal wind, you feel the weight of your own doubt. The grand vision of a republic feels precarious, held together by nothing more than the stubborn refusal of a few people to admit defeat. You realize that you are being asked to believe in a future that remains entirely invisible, while the present demands a price that is terrifyingly real. But you keep walking. You do not stop because the alternative, a return to a life dictated by the whims of a distant monarch, feels like a betrayal of the person you have become. The storm is intensifying, and you are the only shelter your family has. You are not a hero, but you are a survivor, and for now, that is the only role that matters. The tension that has been simmering in the valley finally boils over on a Tuesday, when a small shipment of iron tools, meant for the village smithy to repair farm equipment, is found missing from the storehouse. In a time of scarcity, this is not just theft. It is a direct blow to the collective ability to survive the spring planting. Accusations fly through the air like flint sparks. You watch as men who have shared the same benches and the same fears begin to eye one another with suspicion, the thin veneer of revolutionary solidarity cracking under the pressure of survival. You find yourself in the center of the storm. The village committee is fractured. Some demand a trial and a public shaming to restore order, while others argue that such division will only play into the hands of the British scouts rumoured to be operating in the next county. You realise that the enemy is no longer just the soldiers in red coats. It is the corrosive fear that makes a man prioritise his own survival at the expense of his neighbour. The revolution, which started as a glorious leap toward freedom, now feels like a descent into a scramble for crumbs. It is in this atmosphere of mutual distrust that you take a step that feels both incredibly dangerous and absolutely necessary. You decide to bypass the formal accusations. You spend the night moving from cabin to cabin, not to interrogate, but to listen. You don't ask about the stolen iron. You ask about the health of their children, the state of their remaining winter stores, and the weight of their own private agonies. You discover that the thief was a neighbour whose youngest child was so close to death from the cold that he had planned to sell the tools to a passing peddler just to buy bread. When the truth comes out, the village is faced with a profound moral dilemma. The strict interpretation of law and order demands punishment, but the spirit of the compact, the very foundation of the new republic, demands something else: communal accountability. You stand before the gathered villagers and propose a path that is both radical and necessary. The community will not punish the man, but will instead share the burden of his failure. You will pool the remaining grain, redistribute the labour to cover his fields, and effectively adopt his family's survival as a communal obligation. It is a moment of profound, heavy silence. You see the pride of men struggling against the logic of survival, but one by one the nods of agreement begin to ripple through the room. This is the moment when the revolution truly takes root. You realize that you have moved beyond the superficial politics of the coast. You have begun to forge a local, tangible democracy based on the radical idea that we are, in fact, our brother's keeper. The iron was never the point. The point was whether you would let your neighbours drown in their own desperation. By choosing to mend the fracture, you have built a wall of resilience that no British magistrate could ever hope to break. The thaw finally came, turning the frozen paths into treacherous, sucking mud. In any other year this would be a time of celebration. The return of the green, the promise of the plough, the quiet rejuvenation of the valley. But in the spring of 1777, the thaw brings only a new kind of terror. The mountain passes, once sealed by snow, are now passable, meaning the threat of roving patrols, both British and opportunistic brigands, is no longer a theoretical fear, but a daily tactical reality. You find that you are no longer just a farmer tending his land. You are an observer of the horizon, constantly scanning for the dust clouds that signal unwanted visitors. You take your plough to the field, the soil heavy and rich with the promise of life, but there is a strange dissonance in your movements. Your hand, calloused by the handle, constantly reaches for the musket slung across the stump of a nearby oak. You are planting seeds for a future you are not certain you will live to see, in a field that might be trampled by cavalry by nightfall. This is the new rhythm of your existence, a persistent, agonizing split between the primitive necessity of labor and the volatile necessity of defense. You are learning that to build a nation, one must be willing to sow in the shadow of a sword. The social fabric of the village has become more rigid. There is little room for neutrality now. The turning of the soil has forced every man and woman to choose a side. Those who refuse to participate in the collective guard or who hide their grain from the community stores are no longer viewed with pity. They are viewed with cold suspicion. You see the emergence of a frontier justice that is as unsettling as it is necessary. Disputes are settled quickly and without the long, winding debate of the old magistrate days. You find that the community, stripped of its imperial protections, has become a self-correcting, almost ruthless mechanism for survival. You watch your younger neighbours, those who were boys only a year ago, now moving with the tense, predatory grace of men who have seen the worst of humanity. Their innocence has been harvested by the war, replaced by a grim competence. It is a loss that weighs heavily on you. You realize that while you are fighting for the independence of the land, you are witnessing the erosion of a certain kind of innocence that can never be replanted. The cost of this freedom is being paid in the currency of their childhoods. As the sun sets, casting a long, blood-orange light across the freshly turned furrows, you stand alone in the center of your field. The birds are singing, a persistent, indifferent melody that underscores the fragility of your position. You feel the pulse of the earth beneath your boots, a deep, ancient rhythm that has outlasted empires and will outlast this war. You have decided that no matter what comes, you will keep ploughing. This is your act of defiance, to labor, to nurture, and to sustain. When the world demands destruction, this is the most radical, revolutionary act you can perform. The spring is here, and you are ready for whatever it brings. The warm breeze of late spring now carries a sound that is entirely alien to this valley, the rhythmic hollow thud of marching boots and the distant metallic jingle of horse harness. It is not an invasion, not yet, but a persistent creeping pressure. Small reconnaissance parties, moving with a cold professional detachment, have begun to appear on the periphery of your land. They are like scouts of a storm front, measuring the resources of the valley, testing the loyalties of the inhabitants, and leaving behind a wake of nervous tension. You find yourself practicing a form of tactical silence. When the soldiers pass by, you do not meet their eyes. You are simply a man at his work, a fixture of the landscape as indifferent as the trees. You have learned that your anonymity is your greatest armor. The soldiers look at you and see a peasant, a creature of the soil, who has no stake in the high-flown debates of kings and congresses. They do not see the man who, under the cover of night, marks the location of their camps for the local militia, or who hides the best of his harvest in the hollows of the limestone ridge. You are playing a dangerous game of shadows, and every heartbeat is a potential betrayal. The disruption to your daily life is absolute. The simple act of checking your fences has become a reconnaissance mission. The trip to the village mill is a calculated risk. You notice that the cattle are agitated, sensing the change in the air. the smell of unfamiliar horses, and the frantic energy of their owners. The harvest is months away, yet you are already calculating how to hide the yield before it even ripens. This is no longer just farming, it is a complex, high-stakes choreography of deception and endurance. You are maintaining the pretense of a peaceful life while orchestrating a clandestine resistance. You observe the soldiers with a clinical, analytical eye. You see the gaps in their discipline, the signs of their own fatigue, and the way they look at your land not as a home, but as a logistics problem to be solved. It gives you a strange, cold comfort. They are men, just as you are, driven by orders they did not write, and fighting for causes they may not fully understand. But unlike them, you have a physical anchor, this soil, this home, this family. You are fighting on ground that knows your name, while they are merely guests in a theatre of war. This advantage of belonging, you realize, is the single most powerful weapon you possess. As night falls, you sit on your porch and watch the faint orange glow of a campfire blooming in the distance, like a dying ember against the velvet dark of the valley. You do not feel the paralyzing fear of the previous year. Instead, you feel a sharp, focused alertness. The war has arrived, not as a thunderclap, but as a slow, inexorable tide. You have accepted that you cannot turn it back, but you can navigate it. You have refined your survival into a craft, and for tonight your house is secure, your secrets are buried, and you are prepared for whatever the morning mist reveals. The test is beginning, and for the first time you are ready to play the game on your own terms. The morning air is heavy, saturated with the scent of damp earth and the metallic tang of approaching rain. You are repairing a section of the stone wall near the road when the detachment appears. There is no herald, only the sudden, jarring emergence of uniforms, scarlet and dark blue, cutting through the soft greens of your spring field. They are not here to fight a battle, they are here for forage and information. Your heart doesn't race, it settles, becoming a cold, steady rhythm. You have prepared for this moment in the quiet hours of 100 nights. The officer, a man with a face etched by the harsh lines of a seasoned campaigner, rides his horse directly towards you. He does not ask, he demands. He wants to know the location of the nearby storehouse, the size of the local militia, and the loyalties of the men in the next valley. He looks at you, dirt-streaked, calloused eyes shadowed by the brim of your hat, and sees nothing but a relic of the landscape. He mistakes your stillness for ignorance. He underestimates you, and in that miscalculation you find your opening. You answer slowly, your voice carrying the measured, deliberate cadence of a man whose world is defined by seasons and soil, not by commands and decrees. You offer the truth, but it is a fragmented truth, a labyrinth of details about poor crops, impassable roads, and empty barns. You lead him through a maze of half-facts that serve to frustrate his objective without providing a single piece of tactical value. You are performing the most dangerous role of your life, the simple, uninformed farmer. You watch his impatience mount, a flicker of irritation in his eyes, but he cannot fault your civility. He has nothing to pin his suspicion upon. In that silence between his questions, you feel the weight of everything you are protecting. It is not just the grain or the livestock. It is the fragile, growing independence of your neighbours and the seed of the republic that resides in the shared determination of the valley. Every word you withhold is a victory. Every direction you misdirect is a small act of defiance. You are not a soldier with a musket, but you are a soldier of the spirit. You realize that power is not always found in the strike of a sword. Sometimes it is found in the ability to hold one's ground when the world demands you move. They leave as quickly as they arrived, their horses' hooves churning the soft earth of your road into a mire. You watch them recede into the distance, a retreating menace that you have successfully weathered. The adrenaline that was coiled in your muscles begins to dissipate, leaving behind a sharp, clean sense of clarity. You pick up the stone you had set aside and place it firmly back into the wall. It is a small repair, but it feels significant. The wall is intact, the perimeter is held. You look out over the field, and though the threat lingers on the horizon, you feel no tremor in your hands. You have looked into the eyes of the storm and remained unmoved. The work of the day continues. The departure of the detachment did not bring relief. It brought a heavy, suffocating awareness. News of their visit travelled faster than the spring thaw, and by evening your neighbours were gathering in the shadows of your barn, their faces illuminated by the dim flicker of a lantern kept low. They were not looking for leadership, they were looking for confirmation that the line could be held. You told them of the officer's questions, the path you pointed him toward, and the way he had looked at the land. As you spoke, you realized that your experience had become their roadmap. The dynamic of the community had shifted. The fear that once threatened to tear the village apart now acted as a binding agent. You saw a transformation in the blacksmith's posture. The weary, jagged edge from before had sharpened into a focused, lethal intent. He and the others were no longer talking about the practicality of reconciliation. They were talking about concealment, about the timing of signals, and about the necessity of protecting the most vulnerable among them. The confrontation had stripped away the last illusions of safety, and in their place, a grim, militant pragmatism had taken root. You were no longer just a farmer, you were a sentinel. Your homestead had become a pivot point in a silent, decentralized network of resistance. You realized that this was how the revolution would truly be won, not through grand battles that filled the pages of history books, but through thousands of these small local instances of defiance. Each man and woman in the valley was taking on the role of a guardian, watching the woods, protecting the stores, and maintaining the fragile thread of continuity that the war sought to sever. There was a profound, quiet strength in this realization. You felt the weight of the community's trust, not as a burden, but as an anchor. It grounded you. You knew that if the soldiers returned, they would not find a scattered, frightened population. They would find a collective that had already decided its own fate. This was the true nature of a republic, a people who held their own borders, governed their own fears, and stood as one in the face of an external tide. The individual was being subsumed into something greater, not by force, but by the shared recognition of what was at stake. As the meeting dispersed and your neighbours melted back into the night, you stood in the silent yard, looking toward the distant ridges where the soldiers' watchfires still burned. The air was cool, smelling of damp soil and the promise of a new season. You felt a strange, detached calm. The complexity of the war had been stripped away, leaving only the fundamental truth. You were here, you were still standing, and you were not alone. The work was far from over. In fact, the hardest part was likely just beginning, but for this moment you felt an absolute, unshakable clarity of purpose. You were ready for the morning. The tension of the last few days has forged a new reality in the valley. You wake before dawn, not to the familiar, comforting routine of farm life, but to a state of heightened, nervous alertness. The silence of the morning feels thin, like a veil that could be torn by the sound of a single horse's gallop. You have moved the last of your hidden grain, relocating it to a deep, stone-lined cave in the northern ridge, a place known only to the most trusted. Every trip to that cave is a risk, a shadow dance of caution where you are constantly measuring the distance between your survival and your exposure. You realize that this is the essence of your sacrifice. You are losing the ability to live a life of comfort or certainty. You are trading the sanctity of your private home for the safety of the collective. Your barn is no longer a place of harvest, but a staging area for communal resources. Your tools are no longer just for planting. They are kept sharp and ready should the unthinkable happen, and you need to protect the life you've built. You are mourning the loss of the man you were a year ago, the man who believed that the world was orderly, predictable, and fair. Yet, in this loss, there is a strange, profound sense of liberation. By letting go of the expectation of safety, you have ceased to be a hostage to your own fear. You see your neighbours walking the same path. You pass them on the road, the miller, the blacksmith, the mother who lost her son, and there is a shared wordless acknowledgement in their eyes. It is the look of people who have already accepted the worst-case scenario and have decided that, regardless of the cost, they will not be broken. This is the bedrock of the republic you are building, not a document or a law, but a consensus of character. The afternoon brings a chilling confirmation of your fears. A scout from the militia, a boy, no older than 16, breathless and eyes wide with the adrenaline of the hunt, arrives to warn you that a larger force is moving through the adjacent valley. They are burning what they cannot carry. The news hits you with the dull thud of a physical blow, but it does not cause you to panic. It acts as a catalyst. You know exactly what must be done. You and the others have prepared for this. The silent network is activated. Messages are passed, the cattle are driven into the deeper timber, and the valley prepares to become a ghost land before the eyes of the enemy. As the sun begins to dip, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and warning red, you stand at the edge of your property. You look at the cabin, the hearth that has been the center of your universe, the table where your children sat, the walls that held the memories of a decade. You are prepared to walk away from it if necessary. The realization doesn't fill you with despair, it fills you with a cold iron resolve. The building is just timber and stone. The spirit that animates it is what you are fighting to preserve. You go inside, take one last long look at the flickering fire, and then begin to extinguish it. The night is coming, and with it the final test of your resolve. The hearth is cold, the embers buried under a layer of grey ash. You have moved your family to the secondary shelter, a damp but hidden dugout beneath the thicket near the creek. It is not home, but it is safe. Now, you return to the clearing alone. The world has narrowed to the reach of your hearing. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of dry leaves is a signal. The valley is no longer yours in the way it once was. It is a contested space, a chessboard of shadows where you know the terrain better than any soldier from across the ocean ever could. You crouch in the darkness behind the stone wall you mended only days ago. You see them before you hear them, the dull silhouettes of a scouting party against the faint starlight. They move with the confidence of conquerors, their heavy tread echoing in the silence. You feel a strange sense of detachment. They are walking on your soil, touching your fences, breathing your air, yet they are utterly alien to this place. They are looking for an army, for lines of red and blue, for cannons and commands. They will never find what they are looking for, because they are looking for a war, and you are living a defense. You watch as they pass, so close you can hear the leather of their belts creaking. They stop near the well. One of them mentions the house, pointing toward the dark shape of your cabin. A command is barked, harsh, foreign, and demanding. They approach the door. You stay perfectly still, your breath controlled, your pulse steady. You have realized that the hardest part of this revolution is not the act of fighting, but the discipline of knowing when not to. To attack now would be a sacrifice, not a victory. You are a sentinel of patience, waiting for the moment when the tide truly turns. They find the house empty. Their frustration is palpable, a ripple of irritation that flows through the small group. They loot a few simple items, a mockery of your life, but they leave the core of your existence untouched. They do not know that you are watching, that the valley itself is an eye focused on them. As they move on, their presence fading into the deeper woods, you feel a surge of grim satisfaction. You have played the part of the ghost, and you have survived. You have denied them the victory of capture, and in doing so you have claimed a victory of your own. You emerge from the shadows only when the last echoes of their departure have died away. You walk through the dark, silent yard, stepping lightly on the earth you have tilled. You are the rightful owner of this ground, not by title, but by the fact that you are still here, standing in the dark, watching the stars wheel overhead. The revolution is not being won on a distant battlefield, it is being won here, in the cold, quiet places where the people refuse to disappear. You are the shadow that remains after the storm passes. The night is deep, and the road ahead is long, but you have proven to yourself the one truth that matters. They can occupy the land, but they can never own the people who have claimed it as their soul. You are ready for the next move. The dawn of the next day is pale and hesitant, filtering through the thick canopy of the forest as if afraid to reveal the wreckage left behind. You emerge from the shadows of the creek bed and return to the clearing. The house remains, weathered and silent, standing as a defiant monument to your persistence. You see the signs of the soldiers' intrusion, a broken chair, a scattering of dried goods, but you feel no anger. Anger is a fire that consumes the keeper, and you have learned to channel your energy into something more durable, the iron coldness of resolve. You make your way through the woods to the meeting point, a hollow beneath a massive ancient oak that has seen more winters than anyone in the village. Your neighbours are already there, emerging from the brush like woodland spirits. They do not speak of the fear they felt last night. Instead, they share information. One saw the enemy's supply wagons moving toward the western ridge. Another marked the location of their poorly guarded picket line. In this exchange, you see the true architecture of the revolution. It is not built on formal declarations or the grand speeches of distant men in Philadelphia. It is built on this, the accurate, whispered, vital intelligence gathered by the common man. You realize that by simply surviving, by refusing to be intimidated, you have become an anchor for those around you. You look at the faces of these people, the tired eyes, the set jaws, the hands that are perpetually stained with the earth, and you realize that you are the heartbeat of a new kind of power. The enemy can burn a barn, they can steal a harvest, and they can terrorize a household, but they cannot occupy a network of people who trust one another with their lives. You have created a community that is invisible, fluid, and entirely impossible to govern by force. The plan is simple, born of necessity, and executed with the precision of long-practiced labor. There is no call for a grand charge. There is only the whisper of a collective intent. Tonight, the enemy's logistics will be disrupted, not by a battle, but by a series of accidents. A bridge that becomes impassable, a trail that leads into a bog, a supply chain that mysteriously fails to deliver. You are the architect of these small, demoralizing failures. You are chipping away at the enemy's momentum, not by fighting their strength, but by exploiting their ignorance of the land you call home. As the afternoon wears on, you return to your chores, moving with a deceptive, rhythmic slowness. To any observer, you are merely a farmer fixing a fence, mourning his losses, and preparing for the next season. But beneath the surface, your mind is a web of calculations. You are the invisible force that is unraveling the occupier's hold on the valley, one thread at a time. The revolution is no longer a dream. It is an action performed in the soil and the silence. You are no longer just waiting for the future. You are actively constructing it. The work is quiet, it is dangerous, and it is the most important thing you have ever done. The seasons have turned once more, and the valley, the same valley that bore witness to the tremors of war and the quiet desperation of 1776, is bathed in the golden light of a hard-won peace. The scars on the landscape are beginning to fade, covered by the patient restorative work of nature and the steady hand of the man who never left. You stand once again on the threshold of your home, but the man looking out at the horizon is not the same one who stood here 50 parts ago. The fear of that first winter has been replaced by the quiet, heavy knowledge of what a person can endure, and more importantly, what they can build. You look down at your hands. They are mapped with the story of these years, the callouses of the plough, the tension of the musket, and the steady guiding rhythm of a life reclaimed. You have not just farmed the earth, you have cultivated an ideal. The community that once splintered under the weight of occupation has emerged, not as it was before, but as something far more resilient. You are no longer just a collection of neighbours, you are the foundation of a new society, one that understands that liberty is not given, but maintained in the daily humble acts of living, working, and standing together. Your children play in the field, their laughter ringing clear and unburdened, a sound that to you is the true anthem of the Republic. They do not know the depth of the shadows you walked through, nor do they fully grasp the price of the ground they run upon. That, you realize, is the ultimate victory. You have taken the burden of the past so that they might walk into the future with nothing but the promise of their own potential. You have laid the stones of the foundation, ensuring that the structure above them will stand against the winds of any empire that might threaten it. The sun begins to set, casting long, peaceful shadows over the valley. The distant, faint sound of a church bell rings, not with the urgency of a warning, but with the measured, steady heartbeat of a life returning to its natural cadence. You breathe in the air crisp, clean, and smelling of the turning earth. The war is a chapter in the history books of the nation, but for you it is a memory etched into the very soil beneath your boots. You have done your part. The baton has been passed, the fields are sown, and the harvest, the freedom you fought so silently to preserve, is secure. You turn away from the horizon and head toward the cabin, the light of the hearth beckoning from within. You do not look back. There is no need. The history of this place is written in the rows of the field, the stability of the walls, and the enduring strength of the people who chose to remain. You have lived the revolution, not as a myth, but as an ordinary, grueling, and ultimately glorious commitment to the dignity of the human spirit. Your story is done, and it is perfect. You are home. Sleepy History with Kevin is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.